Greetings, road warriors. Tonight, our chronicle covers a stretch of asphalt that has earned a reputation more for what it lacks than for what it possesses. We are heading into the vast, silent heart of the American West, where the horizon stretches out so far it seems to curve with the Earth itself, and the radio static is often the only conversation partner you'll find for 100 miles. It is a place of stark beauty, intimidating emptiness, and a history written in silver, sweat, and sagebrush. Let's be honest, backing a 53-foot trailer into a tight spot on the first try, right between two pristine owner-operator rigs, is a feeling that never gets old. It's that tiny spike of dopamine that convinces us we are masters of physics. But out where we are going tonight, the challenge isn't the tight squeeze, it's the endless expansion. It's the challenge of keeping your mind occupied when the white line hasn't changed its angle in 45 minutes. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment below with your current location and the local time. It's always grounding to see just how far our convoy stretches across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The heavy diesel engine settles into a rhythmic idle, a low, throaty purr that vibrates gently through the floorboards of the cab. We're sitting on the outskirts of Carson City, Nevada, the last true bastion of dense civilization, before the map opens up into a whole lot of nothing. The sun is just beginning to dip below the towering peaks of the Sierra Nevada behind us, casting long, bruised shadows of purple and indigo across the valley floor. Inside the cab, the air smells faintly of stale coffee, and that specific industrial scent of vinyl and dust that every truck seems to acquire after 100,000 miles. Carson City is deceptive. It feels like a standard American town, full of stoplights, fast food chains, and the bureaucratic hum of a state capital. But as the truck hisses, the air brakes releasing with that familiar pneumatic sigh, and the 18 wheels begin to turn, you can feel the shift in the atmosphere. We are leaving the safety of the grid. We are turning onto US Route 50, pointing the massive chrome grille of the rig eastward. The truck, a long-nosed Kenworth with a sleeper cab that feels more like a small apartment than a vehicle, groans slightly as it takes the weight of the load. We're hauling a flatbed of specialized mining equipment, heavy steel components destined for one of the remote extraction sites near Ely. It's a deadweight load, low to the ground and heavy, which means the suspension is compressed, and the ride will be stiff until we hit the highway speeds where the air ride system can do its work. As we roll past the final suburban outposts of Carson City, the road signs change. They stop advertising burger joints and start warning of distances that seem almost abstract. Ely, 320 miles. In most parts of the world, 320 miles involves passing through a dozen towns, crossing 3 rivers, and maybe navigating a ring road or two. Here, it is simply a straight shot through the void. This specific route, US-50 across Nevada, carries a title that is equal parts warning and marketing slogan: the loneliest road in America. It's a moniker that sticks in the mind, suggesting a kind of melancholic solitude. The name actually originates from a journalistic jab. In July 1986, Life magazine ran an article detailing this stretch of highway. The author, perhaps used to the dense clutter of the East Coast, described the route as possessing no attractions and warned readers not to risk the journey unless they possessed survival skills. They painted a picture of a desolate wasteland where a breakdown meant certain doom. The locals, possessing that dry desert wit, didn't get offended. They put the slogan on signs, they printed it on brochures, they essentially said, "Yes, it is lonely. Good luck." And tonight, as the city lights of Carson fade in the side view mirrors, replaced by the encroaching darkness of the high desert, you can understand what that journalist was afraid of. The comfort of the crowd is vanishing. The geography here is distinct and it dictates the rhythm of the drive. We are entering the Basin and Range province. Geologists describe this area as a result of the Earth's crust stretching and thinning over millions of years. The result is a repetitive, hypnotic landscape. A wide, flat valley, the basin, followed by a north-south mountain range, followed by another basin and another range. It's like a corrugated tin roof magnified to a geological scale. For a trucker, this means the drive is never truly flat. It is a constant cycle of climbing and descending, a rhythmic rise and fall that demands constant attention to the pyrometer and the transmission. Speaking of the transmission, we are working an 18-speed Eaton Fuller tonight. For those who haven't had the pleasure, this isn't like shifting a Honda Civic. It requires a technique often called floating gears, where you don't use the clutch pedal for shifting once you're moving. Instead, you match the engine's RPMs to the road speed perfectly, sliding the shifter into the next gate at the exact moment the gears align. It's a dance of timing and ear, listening to the turbo spool and the engine growl. Miss a shift on an uphill grade with a heavy load, and you lose all your momentum instantly, forced to drop down 4 or 5 gears to recover. But get it right, and it's seamless. A fluid transfer of power that makes the massive machine feel graceful. As we climb the first significant grade leaving the Carson Valley, the engine temperature gauge climbs slightly, a needle hovering in the green but leaning toward the right. The turbocharger whines, a high-pitched whistle cutting through the rumble. Outside, the vegetation is changing. The leafy deciduous trees of the city are gone, replaced by the omnipresent sagebrush. It covers everything in a grey-green carpet that looks soft from a distance but is actually tough, woody, and resilient. This is the Great Basin Desert. It's a cold desert, not a hot sandy one like the Sahara. Tonight, the temperature outside the cab is dropping fast, plummeting from a pleasant 60 degrees down into the 40s as the altitude climbs. There is a psychological shift that happens when you cross that invisible line out of the city limits. The chatter on the CB radio dies down. In the city, the radio is a mess of noise, people stepping over each other, arguing about traffic, advertising chrome shops. Out here, the squelch knob stays turned up, and the silence is heavy. When a voice does break through, it's usually faint, a distant skip bouncing off the atmosphere from 3 states away, or a lone driver just checking if anyone else is alive out there. There's a story old-timers tell about a driver named Sarge, a Vietnam vet who ran this route back in the 70s before cell phones were even a sci-fi dream. Sarge claimed that on US-50 the silence was so thick you could hear your own past catching up to you. He said the road was a mirror. If you were angry, the road fought you with headwinds and blown tyres. If you were peaceful, the road laid down flat and let you glide. One night, Sarge broke down just east of Carson with a blown radiator hose. He sat there for 6 hours under the starlight, not a single car passing him. When a patrolman finally pulled up, Sarge was sitting on his bumper, brewing coffee on a camping stove, completely content. He told the cop, "I haven't had a conversation this good in 20 years, referring to the silence. We aren't breaking down tonight, hopefully. The dashboard is a constellation of amber and green lights, all systems nominal. The headlights cut a bright white cone into the darkness, illuminating the reflectors on the asphalt. The road surface here is surprisingly good, smooth blacktop that hums beneath the tyres. The state of Nevada takes pride in this road, despite the lack of traffic. It's a lifeline, a vital artery connecting the scattered communities that cling to existence in the basins. To the left, the dark outline of a ridge blocks the stars. To the right, the emptiness seems to drop away into a canyon. We are moving at a steady 60 miles per hour, the legal limit for trucks here, though the four-wheelers will zoom past doing 80 or 90, rushing to get across the void as if the open space burns them. We are approaching the first real descent now. The Jake brake is a marvel of engineering that essentially turns the engine into a massive air compressor to slow the truck down without cooking the wheel brakes. I flip the toggle switch, on the dash. 3 cylinders active. A low, guttural growl erupts from the exhaust stacks, a brr-brr-brr sound that resonates in the chest. It's the sound of control. Without it, descending these grades with a heavy load would be a suicide mission of smoking brake shoes and terrified prayers. The lights of Carson City are gone now, swallowed by the rearview mirror and the curvature of the earth. Ahead, there is only the reach of the headlights and the reflective eyes of the occasional jackrabbit darting into the sagebrush. The isolation is immediate. It doesn't come on gradually, it drops like a curtain. We are alone, but we aren't just driving on asphalt, we are driving over history. This route didn't just appear when the pavement was laid. It follows a path of least resistance that has been used for centuries, first by the Washoe and Shoshone peoples, then by explorers, and famously by the Pony Express. We are tracing a line of communication that once linked a fractured nation, a line held together by young men on fast horses risking their lives for the mail. As the truck settles into the flat bottom of the first basin, the engine quieting as the load lightens, the cab feels like a capsule floating in space. The outside world is dark and cold, but in here, with the soft glow of the instrument panel and the rhythmic thrum of the tyres, it is warm and secure. This is the paradox of the long-haul driver. We are the most isolated people in the country, yet we are at the centre of the machine that keeps the country moving. We pass a sign for a turn-off to a small settlement, barely a smudge of light in the distance. A few ranch houses, maybe a barn. It makes you wonder about the people who choose to live this far out, right on the edge of the grid. Do they hear the trucks passing at night and wonder where we're going? Or have we just become part of the background noise like the wind in the sagebrush? The road stretches out straight as an arrow for 10 miles. You can see the headlights of an oncoming car maybe 15 miles away. A tiny pinprick of light that slowly, agonizingly grows larger. It will take 10 minutes for us to meet and pass. That is the scale of the Great Basin. Time dilates here. 10 minutes in a city is a rush to the post office. 10 minutes here is just watching a light get slightly brighter. We check the mirrors again. Habit more than necessity. The red marker lights of the trailer are steady. The tyres are throwing up a little dust from the shoulder. We're tracking true. This is the start of the gauntlet, the beginning of the trek across the corrugated heart of Nevada. We have left the neon behind, and now it's just us, the rig, and the ghosts of the pioneers who walked this way when the loneliest road was nothing but a trail of dust and hope. As the high beams sweep across the scrub brush, catching the reflective eyes of a coyote that pauses to watch us thunder by, it is easy to feel like the first person to ever cross this expanse. The darkness here is possessive. It swallows the light the moment it leaves the bulbs. But if you look closely at the shoulder of the road, past the gravel and the modern delineator posts, you can sometimes spot faint scars in the earth, parallel ruts worn into the hardpan clay that predate the asphalt by decades, even centuries. We are not blazing a trail tonight. We are simply the latest shift in a relay race that began over 160 years ago. We are rolling through the heart of Pony Express territory. It's strange to think that the most technologically advanced communication network of the mid-19th century ran right through this emptiness. Today, if you want to send a message from Missouri to California, you hit send, and a satellite or a fibre optic cable handles it in milliseconds. In 1860, if you wanted that same message delivered, you relied on a skinny teenager with a death wish and a very fast horse. The US-50 corridor roughly parallels the old Central Overland route, which was the artery for the Pony Express. As our Kenworth eats up the miles at a steady 60, vibration-free thanks to the air ride suspension, try to imagine doing this same route at a full gallop. The riders were the hotshot truckers of their day, the guys you call when the freight absolutely positively has to be there yesterday, and you don't care how much fuel it burns. The job posting for the Pony Express is legendary, perhaps apocryphal in its exact wording, but accurate in spirit. Wanted, young, skinny, wiry fellows not over 18, must be expert riders, willing to risk death daily, orphans preferred. It makes the modern requirements for a CDL, clean driving record, pass a drug test, don't hit any bridges, seem positively luxurious. Back then, the background check was essentially checking if you had a pulse, and if you could shoot a Colt revolver while moving at 20 miles per hour. We are passing a marker now for one of the old relay stations. They were spaced about 10 to 15 miles apart, roughly the distance a horse could sprint before its lungs gave out. In trucking terms, think of these stations as the ultimate truck stops. But instead of roller grill hot dogs and showers, you got a bucket of questionable water, a fresh horse, and a station keeper who might have been the grumpiest man on the continent. The rider would arrive in a cloud of dust, swap the mochila, the specialized leather mail pouch, onto the fresh horse, and be gone in under 2 minutes. It was the Formula One pit stop of the 1860s. Speaking of that mochila, it's a fascinating piece of cargo securement technology. Unlike modern saddlebags that were strapped to the horse, the mochila was a single heavy leather sheet with 4 locked pockets, cantinas sewn into the corners. It had a hole in the centre to fit over the saddle horn. When the rider arrived at a station, they didn't waste time unbuckling straps. They grabbed the mochila, yanked it off the exhausted horse, threw it over the saddle of the fresh horse, and jumped on top of it. The rider's weight was what held the mail in place. It's a brilliant design. If the horse ran off without the rider, the mail stayed with the saddle. If the rider fell off, well, the mail was more important than the rider anyway. The parallels to what we're doing tonight are striking. We're hauling mining equipment, they were hauling news, bank drafts and government orders, but the enemy is the same, time and terrain. The Pony Express cut the delivery time from the East Coast to the West Coast down to 10 days. Before that, mail went by stagecoach, 25 days, or by ship around South America, months. Cutting that time down was an obsession. It's the same obsession that makes us run team drivers today, keeping the wheels turning 24/7 so that someone in Sacramento can get their Amazon package of artisanal coffee beans by tomorrow morning. But let's be real, the suspension on this Kenworth is slightly better than a Mustang pony. The seat I'm sitting in is a marvel of pneumatic engineering, floating on a cushion of compressed air that isolates my spine from the bumps in the road. Those riders, they had leather, wood, and their own calluses. It's said that you could identify a Pony Express rider by his walk, a sort of permanent, painful waddle. If I walk like that at a truck stop, it just means I've been sitting on my wallet for too long. This specific stretch of Nevada, the area we're traversing now between the Carson Sink and the mountain ranges to the east, was the stage for the most legendary feat in the history of the service. It involves a rider named Pony Bob Haslam. In May 1860, during the Paiute War, tensions were high. Stations were being burned, riders were being ambushed. It was a chaotic supply chain crisis that makes a port strike look like a minor inconvenience. Haslam was scheduled for his usual 75-mile run. He galloped east, fighting headwinds and heat, only to arrive at the relief station and find the horses gone and the keeper too terrified to stay. So Pony Bob kept going. He rode his route, then the next guy's route, all the way to Smith Creek, 190 miles without rest. He slept for a few hours, then turned around and rode the 190 miles back, passing burning stations and dodging conflict the entire way, through 80 miles in just under 40 hours. To put that in perspective, 380 miles is roughly a 6-hour drive in this truck. We do it before lunch. Pony Bob did it on adrenaline and saddle leather, knowing that stopping likely meant never starting again. It's the ultimate just one more mile mentality that every long-haul driver knows. You know the feeling. Your eyes are burning, the coffee is cold, but you tell yourself, I'll just make it to the next rest area, and then you pass it and say, well, the next one is only 50 miles further. We push because the road pulls us. The geography out here hasn't changed since Bob's ride. The road we're on climbs and dips following the path of least resistance through the passes. The engineers who laid out the Lincoln Highway, which eventually became US-50, didn't try to fight the mountains. They listened to the horse trails. As we crest a small rise, the headlights illuminate a vast alkali flat to our left. In the daylight, it's a blinding white sheet of salt and clay. In the moonlight, it looks like a frozen lake. This is the terrain that broke the wagons and exhausted the horses. The dust here is alkaline. It's basic on the pH scale. It dries out your skin, cracks your lips, and irritates your sinuses. You can imagine the riders arriving at the end of their shift, their faces coated in a white mask of alkali dust looking like ghosts emerging from the sagebrush. We shift down half a gear as the grade steepens. Listen to that engine note change, a slight deepen in the baritone. The transmission whines softly. We're climbing toward a pass that the riders would have dreaded in winter. The Pony Express ran year-round. While we have heater cores and heated mirrors to keep the frost off, they wrapped themselves in buffalo robes and hoped the horse knew where the trail was, because under 5 feet of snow, everything looks like a drift. There's a strange irony in the history of this route. The Pony Express, for all its fame and glory, was a financial disaster. It went bankrupt. It was obsolete almost instantly. Why? Because while the riders were galloping across Nevada, a team of labourers was stringing a thin copper wire on poles right alongside them, the Transcontinental Telegraph. On October 24, 1861, the telegraph line was completed. A message could travel from DC to San Francisco in seconds, not 10 days. The Pony Express ceased operations 2 days later. It was the quickest technology disruption in history. One day you're the hero of the nation, the fastest thing on 2 legs. The next day, you're just a guy on a horse looking for a job. It's a sobering thought for us in the trucking industry as we watch self-driving technology evolve. We look at the autonomous trucks being tested and think, nah, they'll never replace the human judgment required to back into a dock in a blizzard. I bet the Pony Express riders said, You can't trust a wire to deliver a love letter. But for now, the wire is silent and the road is ours. We pass the skeletal remains of a stone structure off to the right, barely visible in the peripheral gloom. It might have been a station, or a ranch house, or a miner's shack. The desert preserves things well. The dry air sucks the moisture out of wood and stone, mummifying history rather than rotting it. Driving past these ruins gives you a sense of companionship with the past. The solitude of the loneliest road isn't empty. It's crowded with memories. Every time I check the mirrors and see the dark void behind the trailer, I half expect to see a rider overtaking me in the breakdown lane, hat pulled low, urging a lathered horse toward the horizon. Of course, if I actually saw that, I'd probably pull over and check my coffee for hallucinogens. Or maybe just assume I've been driving too long. Hallucinations are a real thing out here, known as highway hypnosis or white line fever. Your brain gets so bored by the lack of visual stimuli that it starts inventing things. A bush becomes a bear, a signpost becomes a hitchhiker. The riders had it worse though. They had exhaustion, dehydration, and the constant fear of ambush. At least when I see a black dog on the road, the trucker's myth of a spectral dog that warns of an imminent crash, I can just pull into a lay-by and take a nap. They had to keep riding. As we descend into the next valley, the lights of the dashboard seem a little warmer. We are carrying the torch now. The cargo has changed, steel instead of letters, and the horsepower is internal combustion rather than equine, but the mission is identical. Connect point A to point B across a landscape that really doesn't want us here. The Kenworth settles into a cruising RPM, the turbo whistling a low, consistent note. We are making good time. The ghost of Pony Bob would be jealous of our pace, though he'd probably make fun of my lumbar support. The ghostly echo of galloping hooves fades into the sagebrush, replaced by a sound that is decidedly less romantic but far more consequential, the sputter and cough of a primitive internal combustion engine. As our Kenworth hums steadily eastward, the red needles of the gauges glowing soft and steady in the dark, we are rolling over a layer of history that sits just above the Pony Express trails, but just below the modern asphalt. We're driving on the ghost of the Lincoln Highway. If you check the Rand McNally Atlas or your GPS, you'll see US-50 marked clearly. But if you look at the older maps, the ones crumbling in the glove boxes of antique shops, this thin ribbon of road was part of a much grander, almost arrogant dream. In the early 20th century, before the interstate system was even a glimmer in a bureaucrat's eye, a man named Carl Fisher had an idea. Fisher was a showman, the kind of guy who built the Indianapolis Motor Speedway because he liked fast cars. In 1912, he looked at the disjointed mess of dirt tracks that America called roads and proposed a single, continuous highway from Times Square in New York to Lincoln Park in San Francisco. He called it the Coast-to-Coast Rock Highway, which eventually became the Lincoln Highway. It sounds simple to us now. We take pavement for granted. We get annoyed when there's a pothole the size of a dinner plate, or when the lane markings are a bit faded. But back then, outside of the major cities, a road was often just a suggestion, a patch of dirt where the grass had been beaten down by wagon wheels. In Nevada, it was worse. It was 2 ruts in the sand and a prayer. As we steer the rig around a long sweeping curve that hugs the base of a rocky outcrop, imagine driving this in 1915. You wouldn't be in a climate-controlled cab with air ride seats. You'd be in a Packard or a Model T, exposed to the elements, bouncing on leaf springs that were about as forgiving as a granite slab, and you wouldn't be doing 60, you'd be lucky to average 15 miles per hour. The section of the Lincoln Highway across Nevada was notoriously the most difficult part of the entire 3,389-mile journey. It was the bottleneck. The guidebooks from that era didn't give you instructions like take exit 45. They gave instructions based on landmarks because there were no signs. A typical entry might read, drive 4.2 miles to the dead cottonwood tree, turn left at the large boulder that looks like a skull, and if you hit the sand wash, you've gone too far. One of the most fascinating technical aspects of this early highway was the concept of the seedling mile. Fisher and the Lincoln Highway Association knew they couldn't afford to pave the whole country themselves. They were private citizens, not the government. So they used a brilliant marketing strategy. They would go into a county, find the worst, muddiest, most miserable stretch of road, and they would pay to pave exactly 1 mile of it, with pristine concrete. The idea was that the locals would drive on the mud, hit this one glorious mile of smooth pavement, realise what they were missing, and then demand their local government finish the rest. It was the original free trial subscription model. Enjoying this smooth ride? Upgrade to the premium package to unlock the next 50 miles. Out here in the desert though, paving was a loose term. Often the best they could do was grade the dirt and clear the biggest rocks. The surface was often a mixture of alkali dust and clay. When it was dry, it was like driving through a talcum powder factory. The dust was so fine it would work its way into everything. The engine intake, the wheel bearings, even the driver's teeth. But when it rained, that fine dust turned into something the locals called gumbo. Gumbo mud is the trucker's nightmare. It's not just slippery, it's sticky. It clings to the tyres, building up layer upon layer until the wheel well is packed solid and the tyres physically cannot turn. Early motorists would have to get out in the pouring rain, take a shovel or a stick, and scrape the mud off their wheels every few hundred yards just to keep moving. There's a legendary story connected to this road, involving a young lieutenant colonel named Dwight D. Eisenhower. In 1919, long before he was president, the US Army decided to test its mobility by sending a convoy of military trucks across the Lincoln Highway. It was a disaster of epic proportions that served as a wake-up call for the nation. The convoy consisted of 81 vehicles. They started in DC and aimed for San Francisco. By the time they hit Nevada, the convoy was limping. The heavy military trucks broke almost every wooden bridge they crossed. They sank into the sand up to their axles. The soldiers spent more time pushing the trucks than driving them. Eisenhower later wrote that the journey through this region was a succession of dust, ruts, pits, and holes. It took them 62 days to cross the country, averaging less than 60 miles a day. That experience stuck with Eisenhower. Years later, when he saw the autobahns in Germany during World War II, he remembered the misery of the Nevada dust. He remembered the broken axles and the exhausted soldiers pushing trucks through the Great Basin. That memory is the direct reason why, in 1956, he signed the interstate highway system into law. So, in a way, the smooth asphalt we are gliding over tonight, and the entire network of interstates that allows us to make a living, was born from the frustration of a young officer stuck in the mud right round here, cursing the state of Nevada's infrastructure. As we check the side mirrors, the trailer tracks perfectly in the lane. We're climbing again, the engine torquing up as we ascend Carroll Summit. The old Lincoln Highway took a slightly different route over some of these passes, often much steeper and sharper than modern engineering allows. You can sometimes see the old grade off to the side, a faint shelf cut into the hill, overgrown with sagebrush. It looks impossibly narrow. Navigating those old passes in a 1920s truck required a technique that has largely been lost, backing up the hill. The fuel tanks in early vehicles were often gravity-fed and located under the front seat or in the cowl. On a really steep incline, if the nose of the car was pointed up, the carburetor would be higher than the gas tank, and the engine would starve of fuel and die. The solution? Turn the car around and drive up the mountain in reverse. Imagine doing that for 3 miles on a dirt shelf with no guardrails, looking over your shoulder while steering a vehicle with the turning radius of a river barge. It puts our complaints about tight docks into perspective. We pass a lone telephone pole standing sentinel in the darkness. In the heyday of the Lincoln Highway, the route was marked by red, white and blue bands painted on these poles, with a big capital L in the centre. Travellers would scan the horizon for that reassuring splash of colour, a lighthouse in the sea of sagebrush. Today, most of those markers are gone, bleached by the sun or replaced by metal signs. But every now and then, enthusiasts will restore one, or you'll find a concrete marker post, a small obelisk affectionately called a Boy Scout marker, installed by troops in 1928 to memorialise the route. Spotting one is like finding an Easter egg in a video game. It's a nod to the initiated. The isolation out here tonight feels heavy, but back then the Lincoln Highway was a social network. Because the road was so tough, there was a camaraderie among the auto campers. If you saw someone stopped on the side of the road, you didn't just blow past them, you stopped. You shared water, tools, and information. How's the road ahead? Wash out at the creek. Better wait a few hours. Watch out for the nail patch near the ranch. There was a peculiar etiquette to this roadside culture. One rule was about water. Every car carried a canvas water bag, usually hung on the front bumper or the radiator cap. The evaporation of the water through the canvas kept the contents cool, a primitive form of air conditioning for your drink. If you came across a radiator that had boiled over, a common occurrence given the steep climbs and low speeds. You offered your water. To refuse was considered a cardinal sin of the desert. Inside our cab, I reach for a bottle of water from the cooler. It's ice cold. I take a sip and appreciate the miracle of modern refrigeration. The temperature gauge on the dash is steady at 180 degrees. The computerized engine management system is adjusting the fuel injection thousands of times per second to account for the altitude and load. We are living in the sci-fi future that those early pioneers dreamed of. Yet, despite the technology, the road itself remains the boss. The curves we are navigating now, the way the road dips into the washes and climbs the ridges, it's the same Earth. The Lincoln Highway Association had a motto: tighten the union. They believed that if people from New York could drive to Nevada and people from Nevada could drive to Iowa, the country would be less divided. The road was a physical stitch holding the patchwork of states together. As we crest the summit, the headlights cut through a wisp of fog, or maybe it's just a low cloud snagged on the peaks. The descent begins. Downshifting, the Jake brake engages again with that reassuring rumble. We are heading down into another basin, another vast bowl of silence. It's easy to romanticize the past, to think of those early drivers as rugged adventurers having the time of their lives, and maybe they were. But I bet if you offered one of them the keys to this Kenworth, with its heated bunk, satellite radio and 600 horsepower engine, they wouldn't hesitate for a second. They'd trade their goggles and dusters for a pair of sweatpants and a steering wheel that doesn't fight back. Still, there is a respect due to them. They smoothed the ruts so we could roll. They broke the axles so we could have paved shoulders. Every mile we cover tonight was fought for, inch by dusty inch, by men in wool suits and women in long skirts pushing Tin Lizzies through the alkali mud. We're coming up on a long straight section, leading toward the town of Fallon. The road widens slightly. The ghosts of the Lincoln Highway are behind us on the pass, stuck in the mud of 1919, but the spirit of the journey, the desire to see what's over the next horizon, is right here in the cab. The lights of Fallon, often called the Oasis of Nevada, because of its lush alfalfa fields fed by the Truckee Carson irrigation project, are now receding in the rearview mirror. It is a brief flash of green and civilization, a couple of stoplights, the smell of wet hay and manure, the sight of a tractor parked by a fence, before the desert reclaims its territory. The transition is abrupt. 1 minute you're rolling past a car dealership and the next, you are plunged back into the obsidian darkness of the basin. We are pushing east again, the Kenworth's tyres singing their own high-pitched song against the pavement. The road here flattens out, running straight through a landscape that feels prehistoric, and in a very literal sense it is. We are driving across the bottom of a ghost ocean. Thousands of years ago, during the Pleistocene epoch, almost this entire region of northwestern Nevada was submerged under a massive body of water known as Lake Lahontan. It covered over 8,500 square miles. If we were driving this route 12,000 years ago, we'd be under 500 feet of water. The truck would be a submarine, and the mountain peaks around us would be islands. As the climate warmed and the water evaporated, it left behind these vast, flat, alkaline basins, the Playas. It also left behind something else, something that looms ahead of us in the darkness like a sleeping giant. About 20 miles east of Fallon you see it. At night it appears as a pale, ghostly luminescence against the black backdrop of the Stillwater Range. It's Sand Mountain. It is not a mirage, though it looks like one. It is a massive singular dune, nearly 600 feet high and 2 miles long, sitting all by itself in a rocky valley. It looks misplaced, as if someone scooped up a piece of the Sahara and dropped it into the Great Basin by mistake. But its existence is a marvel of geological precision. It is what geologists call a terminal dune. Here is the mechanics of it. The prevailing winds blow sand from the southwest, picking up grains from the distant Walker Lake Basin. The wind carries this sand across miles of desert until it hits the Stillwater Mountains. The wind velocity drops as it swirls around the peaks, and it can no longer carry its load. So, it drops the sand. Right here. For thousands of years, the wind has been piling sand in this exact spot, trapped in a natural eddy. If the wind were to stop, the dune would slowly dissipate. If the wind changed direction, the dune would migrate. But because the forces are balanced, the mountain stays, a monument to the power of the air. But the most famous thing about Sand Mountain isn't its size, it's its voice. This is one of the few places on Earth where you can find singing sands. Now, as a trucker, you become attuned to every vibration and noise your rig makes. A new rattle in the dash can drive you crazy for 3 days. A change in the pitch of the turbo can make you pull over in a panic. So, imagine the confusion of the early travellers, and even some modern drivers, when they stopped near this dune and heard a low, booming hum emanating from the ground, sounding like a distant squadron of bombers or a low cello note sustained by a giant bow. The phenomenon is acoustic physics at its most bizarre. The sand grains here are unusually round and polished, and they have a high silica content. When the sand slides down the face of the dune, caused by the wind or someone walking on it, the friction between the grains creates a low-frequency vibration. Because the grains are so uniform in size, they lock into a frequency, amplifying the sound until the whole mountain seems to drone. There's an old story about a long-haul driver in the 1950s named Red Miller. He was running this route in an old Mack B model, a truck that was loud enough on its own. He pulled over near Sand Mountain to check his load straps. He killed the engine, stepped out into the silence, and heard a deep rhythmic hum, hum, hum. Red was a mechanic at heart. His first thought wasn't ghosts or nature. His first thought was, my rear differential is grinding itself to pieces and it's still spinning. He spent an hour crawling under his truck with a flashlight, checking the heat of the hubs, convinced his drivetrain was haunted. It wasn't until a local pulled up and explained the singing sand that Red got back in the cab. He reportedly said, I don't mind the desert trying to kill me, but I hate it when it tries to trick me into doing unnecessary maintenance. We are passing the turnoff for the Sand Mountain Recreation Area now. In the daylight, this place is a chaotic playground for ATVs, dune buggies and dirt bikes. The air is usually filled with the whine of two-stroke engines and the smell of race gas. But at night, the riders are back at their campers and the dune reclaims its silence, or its song if the wind is right. From the high vantage point of the cab, glancing to the right, the dune glows with a spectral white light under the moon. It's beautiful, but it's also a reminder of the harshness of this environment. Sand is the enemy of machinery. It gets everywhere. For a truck engine, sand is death. It acts like sandpaper on the cylinder walls. That's why trucks that run these desert routes often have specialized filtration systems. You might notice on some heavy-haul rigs these cylindrical canisters mounted high up near the exhaust stacks or on the hood. Those are centrifugal pre-cleaners. They spin the incoming air like a mini tornado. The centrifugal force throws the heavier sand and dust particles to the outside of the canister, where they are ejected, allowing only the cleaner air to go down into the actual paper filter. It's a simple, brilliant piece of engineering that keeps the engine from eating the landscape. Without that protection, a dust storm out here could destroy a $30,000 engine in a few hours of operation. It's a constant war. The desert tries to grind us down and we invent better filters. Just at the base of the dune, barely visible in the shadows, are the ruins of the Sand Springs Pony Express station. It was widely considered one of the worst postings on the entire line. There were no trees, no grass, and the water was poisonous, laden with alkali and arsenic. They had to haul fresh water in from miles away. The station keeper lived in a structure made of sandbags because there was no timber and no stone. Imagine living in a bag fort at the base of a screaming sand dune, waiting for a rider to gallop out of the dust in the middle of a literal wasteland. It puts our complaints about slow Wi-Fi at the truck stop into sharp perspective. As we leave the dune behind, the road begins to climb again. We are heading toward the broken volcanic terrain of the Stillwater Range. The engine load increases, the turbo boost gauge climbing to 25 psi. The temperature outside is fluctuating. In these basins, the cold air settles at the bottom like water. As we climb out of the hole, the thermometer might actually rise a few degrees before dropping again at the true summit. It's an atmospheric inversion, common in the high desert. The darkness out here is different than the darkness in the east. In the east there is always a sky glow, the orange tint of distant cities reflecting off the clouds. Here, the sky is ink black. The stars are aggressive. They don't just twinkle, they burn. You can see the Milky Way clearly, a dusty river of light stretching from horizon to horizon. It's one of the perks of the job. People pay thousands of dollars to go to dark sky preserves. We get the view for the price of a tank of diesel, but this darkness also plays tricks on depth perception. The headlights hit a reflector post that looks like it's right in front of us, but it's actually a quarter mile away. The brain struggles to calculate distance without the reference points of trees or buildings. You learn to trust your instruments and your knowledge of the road. You memorize the curves. You know that after Sand Mountain, the road does a lazy S-curve before straightening out for the run to Middlegate. The cab is warm, the coffee in the cup holder is still lukewarm, and the rhythm of the road is hypnotic. Thump thump over an expansion joint. Thump thump, it's a heartbeat. We pass a sign warning of open range. This is another reality of Nevada trucking. There are no fences here. Cattle, wild horses, and burros roam free. Hitting a black cow on a black road at night is a catastrophic event. It's not just about damaging the truck. A 2,000-pound animal can shear the hood off a Kenworth and come right through the windshield. It forces you to scan constantly, your eyes sweeping the verge of the road, looking for the telltale reflection of eyes or the dark, blocky shape of a cow standing on the centerline. I remember a veteran driver telling me, "If you see a cow on the road, don't blow the air horn. They don't know what a truck is. They just freeze. Turn off your headlights for a split second, then flash them back on. Sometimes the change makes them move." I've never tested it, and I hope I never have to. I prefer to let the cows keep their distance. As we roll past the salt flats and the scrub, leaving the singing sands to hum to themselves in the dark, we're approaching one of the strangest landmarks on US-50. It's not a geological wonder or a historic ruin. It's a tree. But it's not just any tree. It's a testament to the weird, collaborative humour of the travelling public. We're getting close to Middlegate, and the legendary shoe tree awaits. The radio is silent, but the truck is humming its own tune, a harmony of gears, wind, and tyres. We're a solitary capsule moving through the void, carrying civilization on our back, leaving only a gust of wind and the smell of diesel in our wake. The singing dune is behind us, but the road ahead has plenty more stories to tell. The road ahead straightens out, a charcoal line drawn across a canvas of dark sagebrush and moonlit dirt. We're approaching a spot on the map that feels less like a town and more like a movie set left over from a 1950s western. This is Middlegate. To the uninitiated, it's a blink-and-you'll-miss-it collection of weathered buildings and a gas pump that looks like it might still charge 20 cents a gallon. To those who run this route regularly, it's a vital waypoint, a place where the barrier between the past and the present is paper-thin. But before we reach the station itself, the headlights catch something strange on the right side of the road. In the distance, it looks like a large, bushy shadow, distinct from the low-lying scrub. As we get closer, the high beams illuminate it fully, revealing a lone, towering cottonwood tree standing defiantly in a dry wash. But it's not the leaves that catch your eye, it's the fruit. Hanging from every available branch, dangling like strange leathery ornaments, are shoes, hundreds of them. Sneakers, cowboy boots, high heels, flip-flops, work boots, roller skates. They sway gently in the desert breeze, a silent, chaotic mobile of footwear. This is the famous Middlegate shoe tree. Actually, to be strictly accurate for the historians in the passenger seat, this is the new shoe tree. The original, a massive cottonwood that stood nearby for decades, was tragically cut down by vandals in 2010, an act of malice that enraged locals and travellers alike. But you can't kill a tradition that easily. Almost immediately, people started throwing their shoes into a neighbouring tree. It's a testament to the stubbornness of the desert spirit. Cut down our monument and we'll just decorate the next one. The truck slows slightly as we roll past, the air brakes hissing as I downshift to get a better look. It's a surreal sight at 2 a.m. In the harsh glare of the LED headlights, the shoes look like ghosts. You can see a pair of red Converse high tops tied together by the laces, draped over a high limb. Lower down, a pair of worn-out work boots swings heavily. The local lore behind this arboreal cobbler shop is as colourful as the shoes themselves. The story goes that back in the mid-1980s, a young couple was driving through here on their way to get married. Or perhaps they were already married and on their honeymoon. The details blur like the heat haze. They got into a massive argument. The groom, in a fit of frustration, pulled over, grabbed the bride's shoes and threw them into the tree. He then drove off to the local bar at Middlegate Station to cool down. The bartender, likely used to this sort of thing, told the groom to go back and apologise. He did. They made up, but they couldn't get the shoes down, so the groom threw his own shoes up there to keep hers company. a symbolic gesture of we're stuck here together. Years later, the couple supposedly returned with their children and threw their kids' baby shoes into the same tree. People saw the shoes, didn't know the story, but felt the urge to participate. Monkey see, monkey do. And thus, a roadside attraction was born. There is something deeply human about this urge to leave a mark. We drive through these vast, indifferent landscapes where the mountains have stood for millions of years, and the wind erases our tire tracks in minutes. We feel small, so we stop. We take something personal, a shoe, an item that literally shapes our walk through life, and we fling it into a tree. We say, I was here, I existed, I wore these size 10 Nikes and now they belong to the road. From a biological perspective, the existence of a cottonwood tree here is its own miracle. Populus fremonti, the Fremont cottonwood, is a riparian species. It needs a lot of water. You don't find them growing on the dry slopes, you find them tracing the underground veins of the desert. Their roots can dig deep, seeking out the water table that hides beneath the dry washes. In the summer, their bright green leaves are a beacon, signalling water here to thirsty travellers and animals for miles around. In the winter, their skeletal white branches look like lightning frozen in wood. As we roll past the tree, leaving the silent congregation of souls behind, we pull up to Middlegate Station itself. It's a low-slung building with a wooden porch and a sign that has seen better decades. Originally, this was a stagecoach stop on the Overland route. Built around 1857, it was a swing station, a place to swap horses and grab a meal of beans and bacon. Today, it's a bar, a motel, and a restaurant famous for the Middlegate Monster, a burger so large that if you finish it, you get a t-shirt and probably a mild cardiac event. At this hour, the station is quiet. A lone pickup truck is parked out front and a dim yellow light glows from the window. It's the kind of place where, if you walked in, the music would stop and everyone would turn to look at you, but they'd probably buy you a beer once they saw the grease under your fingernails. There's an anecdote about a driver named Heavy Haul Harry, not the most creative nickname but descriptive. Harry was hauling an oversized load, a massive generator housing that made his rig nearly 14 feet wide. He had to pull over at Middlegate to wait for daybreak because his permit didn't allow night travel. He went into the bar, ordered a coffee, and struck up a conversation with an old rancher. The rancher asked him what he was hauling. Harry said, "Power." The rancher nodded and said, "We got plenty of power out here. We got wind, we got sun, and we got the stubborn will to not leave." Harry slept in his cab that night, right here in the gravel lot. He said he woke up at dawn to the sound of fighter jets screaming overhead. We are right next to the Naval Air Station Fallon training ranges, home of the Top Gun school. It's a jarring contrast. You're standing in a place that looks like 1860, looking at a tree full of old shoes, and suddenly a $30 million F-35 tears a hole in the sky at Mach 1. The past and the future, colliding in the middle of nowhere. We throttle up, the Kenworth groaning a bit as we leave the gravel shoulder and merge back onto the blacktop. The engine fan kicks on for a moment, a loud whoosh of air that drowns out the radio, cooling the radiator after the slow idle. We are leaving the shoes behind, but the image sticks with you. There's a technical reality to shoes and trucking too. You might not think about it, but the footwear a driver chooses is critical. You're climbing up and down metal steps that are often slick with diesel, rain, or ice. You're walking on oily concrete at fuel islands. A slip can mean a twisted ankle or a fall from 6 feet up. We live in work boots with non-slip soles. But inside the cab, it's a socks-only zone for many of us. We keep the living space clean. There's a psychological separation. Boots on means work, boots off means home. Those shoes in the tree represent the boots off moment, a permanent retirement from the road. The road begins to undulate now, rising and falling over the bajadas, the alluvial fans of debris that wash down from the mountains. The geology here is restless. We are moving into a region of intense seismic activity. Nevada is actually the third most seismically active state in the US, behind Alaska and California. The very ground we are driving on is slowly being pulled apart as the North American plate stretches. You can feel it in the road surface. There are dips and heaves where the earth has settled. The suspension works over time. Chunk, chunk. It's a rhythmic reminder that the earth is not solid, it's just moving slower than we are. Ahead lies the Clan Alpine Mountains to the north and the Desotoya Mountains to the east. We are aiming for a gap in the Desotoyas. The names here are beautiful, linguistic fossils left by the indigenous people and the early explorers. Desolate is believed to be Shoshone, though the exact meaning is lost to time. It sounds rugged, doesn't it? The darkness is absolute now. No city glow, no moon for the moment as it dips behind a peak. The only reality is the cone of our headlights. It's in these moments that you start to talk to the truck. Come on, old girl, easy on the climb. Hold steady now. It's not madness, it's a partnership. The machine is an extension of your body. You feel the engine load in your own chest. You feel the grip of the tyres in your hands on the wheel. We are leaving the basin of the Shoe Tree and starting the climb toward Eastgate and the Carroll summit. The elevation is creeping up again, 400 to 500 feet, 5,000 feet. The air is thinning. The turbocharger spins faster to compensate, compressing the thin air to force-feed the engine oxygen. As we drive away from Middlegate, I can't help but wonder about the couple who, threw those first shoes. Did they stay together? Did they drive back through here 20 years later and laugh about it? Or are their shoes just rotting leather on a dead branch, a monument to a momentary flash of anger? That's the thing about the road. It sees everything, the fights, the makeups, the boredom, the fear, the joy, and it keeps none of it. It just offers a place to leave a shoe, or a tyre track, or a memory before urging you to keep moving. Because out here, if you stop moving, you become part of the landscape. And we have miles to go before we can do that. We check the gauges. Oil pressure 60 psi, water temp 190, volts 14.2. All systems go. The Shoe Tree is just a shadow in the mirror now, a weird, wonderful totem of the Great Basin. We turn our eyes forward to the dark wall of the mountains ahead. The Loneliest Road is about to get a little steeper. The engine note has changed. It's no longer the relaxed, low-frequency thrum of the flatlands. It has deepened into a hard, metallic growl, the kind of sound a machine makes when it is truly working against gravity. We have left the shoe-draped cottonwoods of the basin behind and are now assaulting the ramparts of the Toya Bay Range. This is one of the distinct rhythms of the Great Basin. Long periods of horizontal hypnosis interrupted by intense vertical struggles. We are climbing toward Austin, Nevada. Not the one in Texas with the live music and the barbecue lines. This is the other Austin, the one that time forgot, clinging precariously to the side of a canyon like a barnacle on a ship's hull. The grade here is significant, pushing 6 and 7% in places. For a passenger car, this just means pressing the gas pedal a little harder. For us, hauling 40-odd tons of mining steel, it's a mathematical negotiation between torque, temperature, and momentum. I've dropped 4 gears already. The tachometer needle is steady at 1,500 RPM, the sweet spot where the Cummins engine produces its peak torque. The turbo boost is maxed out. You can hear the fan clutch engage, a sudden roar like a jet engine spinning up, as the computer decides the radiator needs a little extra airflow to shed the heat building up in the block. This is the technical climbing portion of the evening. You can't just mash the pedal, you have to watch the pyrometer. That gauge measures the exhaust gas temperature, EGT. If you let it get too hot, usually over 200 degrees Fahrenheit, you risk melting the pistons or cracking the turbo housing. So you drive by the thermometer, backing off the throttle just enough to keep the engine from cooking itself, while maintaining enough speed to keep the air flowing. It's a slow-motion balancing act performed at 25 miles per hour. As we round a sharp, blind curve, the headlights sweep across a sheer rock face on the left and a terrifying drop-off on the right. Guardrails here are, let's call them optimistic. They are there, but you get the feeling they are more for moral support than actual containment. Then, suddenly the darkness breaks. We aren't greeted by the sprawling suburbs of a modern city, but by the ghostly, flickering streetlights of a town that feels like it's holding its breath. We have arrived in Austin. Austin is often called a living ghost town, which sounds like an oxymoron but makes perfect sense once you're here. In 1862, a Pony Express horse kicked over a rock nearby and revealed rich silver ore. Within a year, this canyon was swarming with 10,000 people. It was the second largest city in Nevada. Today, the population hovers around 150 souls. Rolling through Main Street, which is just US-50 squeezed between century-old brick buildings, you feel like an intruder. The road is narrow here, shockingly so for a federal highway. The sidewalks are raised high off the street, a remnant of the days when mud and horse manure made walking at street level a hazardous affair. Our exhaust stacks echo off the brick facades of the International Hotel and the old courthouse, amplifying the sound of the truck until it feels like we're shaking the dust off the window panes. They call Austin the City of Churches. It's a strange nickname for a rough-and-tumble mining camp, but as we crawl through town in low gear, you can spot them. St. Augustine's Catholic Church, built in 1866, looms on the hillside, its brickwork glowing faintly in the ambient light. The Methodist Church sits further down. At its peak, this town had a church for every denomination and a saloon for every vice. Now the churches stand as silent sentinels, their bells quiet, watching the occasional truck rumble through the night. There is a fantastic, specifically American story attached to this town that involves a sack of flour. It's one of those historical anecdotes that sounds fake but is documented fact. In 1864, during the height of the Civil War, a local grocer named Ruel Gridley made a bet on a local election. He lost. The penalty was that he had to carry a 50-pound sack of flour up the steep main street of Austin to the winning candidate's bar, while a brass band played John Brown's Body. He did it. But when he got there, instead of baking bread, they decided to auction the sack of flour off for the Sanitary Fund, the precursor to the Red Cross, to help sick and wounded soldiers. The winning bidder paid hundreds of dollars, then immediately gave the sack back to be auctioned again. They did this all day. That single sack of flour raised thousands of dollars in Austin. Then Gridley took it on tour to Virginia City, San Francisco, and eventually the East Coast. By the end of the war, that one sack of flour had raised over $275,000, millions in today's money for the troops. It eventually came back to Austin, but the story goes that they baked it into a cake eventually. Gridley himself died penniless, a classic Nevada twist of fate. He raised a fortune for others, but couldn't keep a dime for himself. As we pass the old Gridley store, or where it used to be, I check the mirrors to make sure the trailer isn't clipping any of the parked cars. The locals park right on the street here, and the clearance is tight. It's a reminder that this town was built for mule teams, not 18-wheelers. There's a legendary trucker story about coasting through Austin. Back in the days before reliable engine brakes, drivers coming from the east, heading downhill into town, would sometimes lose their brakes on the steep descent from the summit. There are tales of trucks screaming through this narrow main street at 80 miles per hour, horns blaring, sparks flying, praying that no one was backing out of a driveway. One old-timer told me about a driver who lost his brakes in a 50s autocar. He managed to steer through the curves of the town, shot out the other side, and rolled to a stop 5 miles out in the Reese River Valley, his face white as a sheet. He got out, walked back to town, and bought a drink. He didn't drive for a week. We're climbing out the backside of town now. Austin is situated in such a way that you climb to get into it, and you keep climbing to get out of it, until you hit the true Austin summit a few miles east. The elevation here is serious, 7,484 feet. The air is crisp and thin. If you rolled down the window, it would smell of pine and juniper now, a sharp, clean scent that clears the sinuses. The architecture here is worth a glance, even in the dark. You see a lot of false front buildings. These were wooden structures with a tall, square facade built onto the front to make them look grander and more substantial than they actually were. It was an architectural bluff, a way of saying, we are a real city, when in reality you were just a shack in the desert. It's not unlike some of the Instagram influencers today. A very impressive front facade masking a lot of empty space behind it. We pass a small, lonely gas station on the edge of town. A single attendant is inside, leaning on the counter, reading a book. You have to wonder about the life of a night shift clerk in Austin, Nevada. Who comes in at 3 a.m? Us, the long haulers, needing caffeine, maybe a local insomniac, or maybe just the wind. It takes a special kind of temperament to live in a place that is so geographically isolated. You have to be comfortable with your own company. The road twists again, a final series of switchbacks before the summit. The truck groans, the turbo whistling a high C note. We are doing 20 miles per hour. A cyclist could pass us right now. In fact, cyclists do pass us here. US-50 is a popular route for cross-country bikers. I have immense respect for them. Pedaling a bicycle up a 7% grade at night in the middle of Nevada requires a level of masochism that even truckers don't possess. We at least have air conditioning and a mattress. Cresting the Austin summit is a moment of release. The engine load drops instantly. The roar fades to a purr. We have conquered the Toyabe Range. Below us, invisible in the ink-black night, lies the Reese River Valley. The descent begins. Now, the technique flips. I toggle the Jake brake switch to high. The engine braking system engages with authority. On a downgrade like this, you don't ride the service brakes. If you keep your foot on the brake pedal, the friction heats up the drums. Within a mile, they will glaze over. The lining material hardens and loses its friction coefficient. Then you have no brakes, and then you become the subject of the next trucker ghost story. So we let the engine do the work. The truck growls its way down the mountain, holding a steady speed against gravity. It's a controlled fall. Looking back in the mirror, the lights of Austin are gone, swallowed by the ridge. It's amazing how quickly civilization vanishes out here. One minute you're in a town with history, churches, and a story about a flour sack. The next, you're back in the primordial void. The Reese River Valley ahead is deceptive. The river is often just a trickle, sometimes completely dry. Maps of the West are full of optimistic names like that. River, lake, creek, often just aspirational titles for dusty ditches. But in the 1860s, this valley was a hub of activity. There were silver mills here, crushing the ore brought down from Austin. The noise must have been deafening, steam stamps pounding rock day and night. Now, the only sound is the wind and the tyres. As we level out at the bottom of the grade, the truck picks up speed, stretching its legs again. We are back on the flat, heading toward another strange anomaly in the desert. We are approaching a castle. Not a metaphorical castle, but a literal 3-story stone tower that looks like it belongs in the Italian countryside, not the Nevada sagebrush. But before we get there, take a moment to appreciate the engineering of the road we just traversed. The cut through the mountains at Austin was blasted out by men with dynamite and hand drills. They didn't have GPS grading or laser levels, they followed the mule trails. Every twist and turn we just navigated was dictated by a prospector following a vein of silver or a donkey looking for an easy path. We are driving on the fossilized decisions of the 19th century. The temperature gauge has dropped back to normal. The fan clutch disengages. The cab becomes quiet again. The adrenaline of the climb fades, replaced by the steady endorphin hum of the cruise. We have survived the city of churches and the Austin grade. The truck is running strong, the load is secure, and the loneliest road stretches out ahead, promising more oddities in the miles to come. It's funny. They say this is the loneliest road. But with the ghosts of the miners, the Pony Express riders, and the occasional fellow trucker on the CB, it feels surprisingly crowded tonight. Or maybe that's just the lack of sleep talking. Either way, we keep rolling. As the Jake brake finally disengages and the Kenworth rolls out onto the floor of the Reese River Valley, the heavy gravity of the descent lifts from our chests. We are back on level ground, or at least what passes for level in Nevada. Before we fully commit to the straight shot across the valley floor, if you look back over your left shoulder, up toward the dark ridgeline we just descended, you might spot a peculiar silhouette cutting a square chunk out of the starfield. It looks like a rook from a chess set abandoned by a giant player. It's a 3-story stone tower standing alone on a promontory, looking utterly out of place against the sagebrush and the mining tailings. This is Stokes Castle. In the daylight, it's a stark grey granite monolith. At night, it's a shadow that prompts the question, why is there a medieval fortress in the middle of the Great Basin? The answer is a classic tale of Gilded Age wealth, eccentricity, and the specific kind of madness that the desert seems to inspire in people with too much money. The castle was built in 1897 by Anson Phelps Stokes. Stokes was not a rugged pioneer or a dusty prospector. He was a wealthy Eastern financier, a railroad magnate, and a mining developer. He owned the mine in Austin, and like many men of his era, he wanted a summer cottage near his investments. But when you are Anson Phelps Stokes, you don't build a log cabin. You build a replica of a tower you saw and liked in Italy, specifically the Torre Cajetani in the Roman Campagna. He brought in architects and masons. They used massive hand-hewn native granite blocks. They installed huge glass plate windows, an absolute luxury in the 19th century frontier, and balconies on each floor. The bottom floor was the kitchen and dining room. The second was the living area. The third held the bedrooms. It had plumbing and a fireplace on every floor. It was a marvel of civilization perched on the edge of the wilderness, and here is the punchline, the detail that makes every trucker shake their head in disbelief. The Stokes family used the castle for exactly 1 month. 1 month. June of 1897. Then they packed up, went back east, and never returned. The castle has stood empty for over a century, a monument to a whim. It's the ultimate impulse buy. We've all bought a gadget at a truck stop that we didn't need, maybe a fancy headset or a 12-volt slow cooker that we used once. But imagine building a granite castle and then ghosting it after 4 weeks. From the cab of the truck as we pull away into the darkness of the valley, the castle serves as a grim reminder of the boom and bust nature of this landscape. Nevada is littered with these follies, grand ambitions that withered in the dry air. The mines run dry, the price of silver drops, and the castles are left to the rats and the wind. The road ahead, crossing the Reese River Valley, introduces a new hazard that keeps us awake. We are no longer fighting gravity, on a grade. We are fighting the geometry of the road surface itself. You'll see yellow diamond signs flashing past in the headlights. Dip. Now, in a passenger car, a dip is a fun little swoosh in your stomach. In a loaded tractor trailer, a dip is a physics problem. These dips are actually flood channels. The engineers didn't build bridges over every wash, they just paved down into them and back out. When a flash flood hits, the road becomes a river. Tonight it's dry, but the geometry remains. If you hit a dip too fast in a truck, 2 things happen, and neither is good. First, the suspension compresses fully. It bottoms out. This sends a shockwave through the chassis that can crack a frame rail or shatter your coffee mug. Second, and more dangerously, is the rebound. As the suspension springs back up, the truck can become light, momentarily losing traction. If you are in a curve or if there's a crosswind, that moment of weightlessness can send you sliding toward the sagebrush. So the technique here is steady and ready. You scan the road surface far ahead with the high beams. Modern LED headlights are a game changer here. The old halogen bulbs through a yellowish dim light that seem to get swallowed by the blacktop. These new LEDs punch a hole in the night with a crisp white daylight temperature, around 6,000 Kelvin, that makes the reflectors pop. You spot the dip, lift off the throttle just a hair to let the nose settle, ride through the compression, and then gently power out the other side. It's a rhythmic whoosh, thump, whoosh. The Reese River itself, which we're crossing now, is laughable by East Coast standards. It's barely a creek most of the year. But in 1863, the optimism of the miners was so high that they actually laid out plans for a steamboat wharf in Austin, convinced the river would connect them to the ocean. They were about 300 miles and a mountain range off in their calculations, but you have to admire the confidence. It's that same can-do spirit that makes a driver think he can squeeze a 13-foot 6-inch trailer under a 13-foot 5-inch bridge if he just goes fast enough. Spoiler, he can't. The isolation in this valley feels different than the open basins. It feels narrower, more contained. The mountains on either side, the Shoshone Range to the north and the Toyabis behind us, create a corridor of darkness. This is prime territory for wildlife. The mule deer here are massive, fed on the irrigated alfalfa of the few ranches in the valley. I remember a story from a driver named Sleepless Sal. Sal was a character, the kind of guy who wore suspenders and smoked a pipe in the cab. He swore that one night, right near the turnoff to the Stokes Castle, he saw a light in the top window of the tower. He pulled over, thinking maybe it was kids or a fire. He watched it for 10 minutes. He said it was a steady, warm glow, like a kerosene lamp. Then, it just winked out. Sal was convinced it was the ghost of Anson Stokes come back to check on his investment. The more sceptical among us suggested it was probably a reflection of the moon, or maybe a squatter with a flashlight. But out here, at 3 AM, the ghost story feels more plausible. The desert strips away your skepticism. When you're the only moving thing in 100 square miles, you start to believe that the static objects might be watching you. The cab is filled with the soft blue glow of the instrument cluster. The oil pressure is holding steady at 45 psi. The coolant temperature is a perfect 185. We are a self-contained life support system. It's strange to think about the luxury of this modern truck compared to Stokes' stone tower. He had a fireplace. I have an Esper bunk heater that sips diesel and keeps the sleeper at a cozy 72 degrees. He had a view of the valley. I have a panoramic windshield and dash cam. In many ways, this Kenworth is the modern castle, mobile, fortified, and built for a specific purpose. And unlike Stokes, I actually spend more than a month in it. We pass a lone ranch gate, the cattle guard rumbling beneath the tyres. Brr rump. The sound vibrates through the steering column. These cattle guards are the bane of the suspension, but they are necessary. Nevada is open range state, meaning it's your job to fence cattle out, not the rancher's job to fence them in. If you hit a cow in an open range area, technically you owe the rancher for the cow. It's a harsh rule, but it fits the land. The valley floor is beginning to rise again. We're approaching the Hickerson summit. The dips are becoming less frequent, replaced by the steady pull of an incline. The engine note deepens. We are leaving the folly of the castle behind, trading the ghost of a rich man's vacation home for the ancient reality of the indigenous people who lived here long before dollars or granite blocks existed. There is a shift in the vegetation too. The sagebrush is getting taller, mixing with pinyon pine and juniper as we gain elevation. The smell of the air changes. It gets sharper, pine-scented. This is the pinyon juniper belt, a specific ecological zone between 6,000 and 8,000 feet. For the Shoshone, this was the grocery store. The pine nuts from these trees were a staple food source harvested every autumn. As we grind up the grade, checking the mirrors to ensure the trailer is tracking true, I think about the permanence of things. Stokes Castle is falling apart. The mortar is crumbling. The roof is long gone. But the pinyon pines, they are still here. The road we're driving on will eventually crack and fade if we stop maintaining it. But the path through the mountains will remain. We are just transients here. Whether you're a billionaire building a castle or a trucker hauling steel, the desert just tolerates you. It doesn't care about your schedule, your bank account, or your deadlines. It only cares about water and wind. The radio crackles with a burst of static. Maybe a storm brewing over in Utah, throwing ions into the atmosphere. I reach over and turn the squelch knob, silencing the noise. Better to listen to the engine. That Cummins ISX is singing its own song, a mechanical melody of combustion and compression that translates to paycheck. We are nearing the top of the next rise. The headlights catch the reflective green of a sign. Hickerson Petroglyph Recreation Area. We won't stop, the load has to move, but we will slow down in spirit. Because while Stokes left a stone tower to say I was rich, the people who were here before him left something much more subtle and much more enduring. They left stories carved into the rock itself. The truck crests the small ridge, and for a moment the headlights point up into the infinite black of space before levelling out. We are moving from the folly of the recent past to the mystery of the ancient past. The Loneliest Road is a time machine, and we are the pilots. As the Kenworth powers over the crest of Hickerson Summit, the world seems to contract. We aren't in the wide-open basins anymore, where you can see the curvature of the earth. We are threading the needle through a jumble of rock formations that loom up in the headlights like huddled giants. The elevation here is roughly 6,500 feet, and the air is crisp enough to wake you up if you crack the window. This pass isn't the highest we've climbed tonight. Austin beat it by 1,000 feet, but it is intimate. The road winds tightly through the terrain, forcing us to be active on the wheel. You can't just lock your elbows and stare straight ahead. You have to guide the nose of the truck, feeling the shift in the centre of gravity as the trailer leans into the curves. To our right, hidden in the shadows of the pinyon pines and juniper, lies the Hickerson Petroglyph Recreation Area. We mentioned it briefly as we approached, but now that we are alongside it, the significance of this place demands a moment of mental pause. While we rely on GPS satellites and fibre optic cables to communicate, the people who walked this path thousands of years ago used a much more permanent medium: stone. The rocks here are composed of welded tuff, volcanic ash that was superheated and compressed into stone millions of years ago. Over time, these rocks develop a dark, rusty coating known as desert varnish. It's a thin layer of clay minerals, manganese, and iron oxides that bacteria have cemented to the rock surface. It takes thousands of years to form. The indigenous people of the Great Basin, ancestors of the Western Shoshone, realized that if you chipped away this dark outer layer, you could reveal the lighter, grey rock underneath. It was nature's original scratchboard. These petroglyphs date back anywhere from 1,000 to perhaps 10,000 years. Think about that time frame. When the Egyptians were stacking the first stones of the pyramids, the carvings here were already weathering. When the Romans were paving their roads, these symbols were ancient. And here we are, driving a 500 horsepower diesel machine past them, worrying about our delivery appointment in Salt Lake City. The symbols themselves are a mix of abstract shapes, wavy lines, circles, grids, and recognizable forms like stick figures and animals. Archaeologists argue endlessly about what they mean. Some say it's hunting magic, meant to ensure a good kill during the migration of deer or bighorn sheep. Others think they are maps, or perhaps records of visions from shamans. As a trucker, I like to think of them as the original road signs. Maybe that wavy line means water ahead. Maybe the circle means good place to camp. Maybe the squiggly line that looks like a snake actually means watch out for snakes. We do the exact same thing today. We see a yellow diamond with a black squiggly arrow, and we know winding road. We see a blue square with a fork and knife, and we know food. We haven't changed that much. We just switched from stone chisels to reflective aluminum. Navigating these curves requires a specific visual technique. In a car, you look a few seconds ahead. In a big rig, you have to look through the curve. You're scanning for the exit of the turn before the cab has even entered it. This is because the trailer off-tracks. The rear wheels take a tighter path than the front wheels. If you steer the cab like a car, hugging the inside line, your trailer tyres will drop off the pavement, kicking up dust and potentially dragging the sidewall across jagged rocks. So, you have to button hook slightly, staying wide in the lane, sometimes putting the steer tyre right on the white zipper, the centre line, to drag the trailer safely through the apex. It's a geometry problem that you solve with your hands and eyes every 10 seconds. There's a quiet power to this specific pass. A driver I used to run with, an older guy named Canyon Carl, swore that Hickerson was the only place on US-50 where his CB radio would go dead silent. Not just no chatter, but no static. Just a flat line. He was a superstitious man, the kind who wouldn't drive if a black cat crossed his path in the truck stop parking lot. But he had a point about the atmosphere here. It feels watched. Imagine stopping here 500 years ago. No engine noise, no hum of tyres, just the wind in the pinyon pines and the smell of sage. You would sit by a fire, look up at the same stars we're seeing tonight through the windshield, and carve your story into the rock. You were leaving a message for the future saying, "I was here. This is what I saw." In a way, that's what we do with our logbooks, though they are far less romantic. On duty, 14 hours. Driving, 10 hours. Off-duty Ely. It's a record of our movement, but I doubt archaeologists in the year 4000 will be studying my electronic logs with the same reverence they have for those rock carvings. The geology here also presents a very modern challenge: falling rock. The same volcanic tuff that makes for great art also has a tendency to fracture and crumble. Freeze-thaw cycles, where water gets into cracks during the day, freezes at night, and expands, can pry boulders loose. As we round a particularly tight bend, I scan the asphalt for debris. Hitting a basketball-sized rock at highway speed can shatter an oil pan or blow a steer tyre. And blowing a steer tyre on a mountain pass is a scenario that keeps safety directors awake at night. The descent from Hickerson is less severe than Austin, but it's deceptive. It's a long, gradual glide that can lull you into gaining too much speed if you aren't paying attention. The speedometer creeps up. 62, 65, 68. The truck wants to run. I gently apply the service brakes just to snub, a firm 3-second application to drop 5 mPa, then let the Jake brake hold it. You never ride the pedal. You snub and release, letting the drums cool in between. We are dropping into the Monitor Valley region now. The horizon opens up again. To the south lies the vast emptiness leading toward Area 51, though that's a few mountain ranges away. To the north, the darkness stretches toward the ruby mines. We're in the middle of the mineral heart of Nevada. It's interesting to note that while we focus on the silver and gold history, this area is also rich in barite. You might not have heard of it, but if you've ever had a medical x-ray of your stomach, you've likely swallowed a barium milkshake. Barite is also used heavily in drilling muds for oil and gas wells. It's a heavy, dense mineral. Hauling a load of barite is like hauling a load of lead bricks. The trailer looks empty, but the suspension is crying for mercy. As the road straightens, the tension in the shoulders relaxes. We can settle back into the seat. The rhythmic thrum-thrum of the tyres returns. We have passed through the gallery of the ancients and are moving back into the timeline of the 19th century. Ahead lies Eureka. The name itself is an exclamation. I have found it! It's attributed to Archimedes, but in Nevada it's attributed to a prospector who supposedly cried out the word when he struck silver ore in 1864. Whether he actually said it, or if it was just good marketing, the name stuck. But before we reach the lights of Eureka, we have a few miles of darkness to digest the solitude. This section of the drive between the petroglyphs and the town is often where the loneliness of the road feels most acute. The excitement of the mountain pass is over. The destination is still a blur on the horizon. It's just you and the white line. This is the time when the mind wanders. You start thinking about home, about bills, about that strange noise the refrigerator in the sleeper made yesterday. You start doing mental math. If I average 62 Napoleon, I'll be in Ely. If I stop for a shower, that adds 45 minutes. We are constantly optimizing, constantly calculating. But then you look to the side, past the mirrors, into the sagebrush. You see the faint outline of a ridge against the stars, and you remember the people who walked this. They didn't calculate ETA in minutes. They calculated it in moons. They didn't worry about fuel prices. They worried about water sources. The petroglyphs at Hickerson are a reminder that the need to travel to move across this landscape is hardwired into us. We aren't doing anything new. We are just the latest generation to draw a line across the Great Basin. Their line was a scratch in the rock. Ours is a strip of asphalt. But the impulse is the same, to see what is on the other side of the mountain. The lights of Eureka are just beginning to glow, a faint amber dome in the distance. We check the gauges one more time. Everything is green. The engine is happy. The tyres are cool. The ancient spirits of Hickerson are behind us, watching from their stone galleries as another metal beast roars. Through the night, the darkness of the Antelope Valley gives way to a soft amber glow on the horizon. We are approaching civilization again, or at least the Nevada version of it. The road signs, which have been few and far between for the last hour, suddenly announce our arrival in Eureka. The sign claims it is the friendliest town on the loneliest road. It's a bold marketing strategy, claiming warmth in the middle of a cold desert. But as we roll past the city limit sign, the charm of the place is undeniable, even at 3 a.m. Eureka is unique. Unlike many of the other ghost towns or semi-abandoned outposts we've passed, Eureka feels substantial. It feels permanent. As we throttle down, letting the momentum of the heavy load carry us toward the centre of town, you notice the architecture. It isn't the slapped-together wood framing of a temporary mining camp. It's brick, it's stone, it's Victorian pride solidified in masonry. We're rolling onto Main Street, which is also US-50. The speed limit drops aggressively, from 70 to 50, then to 35, then to 25. In a truck, you have to respect these steps religiously. Small-town sheriffs in Nevada have very accurate radar guns and very little patience for truckers who think slow down is just a suggestion. I gently apply the service brakes, bringing the 80,000-pound beast to a respectful crawl. This is the point where professional courtesy comes into play. You'll often see signs at the edge of these small towns: no engine braking. The distinctive brr brr machine gun sound of a Jake brake is music to a trucker's ears because it means safety, but to a resident trying to sleep in a house 20 feet from the highway, it's a nightmare. So we flip the toggle switch off. We glide in silently, or as silently as a diesel engine with an 18-speed transmission can glide. It's a stealth mission through history. Eureka's history is distinct from the gold and silver rushes of its neighbours. While Austin was a silver town, Eureka was a lead town, specifically silver lead ore. In 1864, prospectors found rock here that was rich in silver, but chemically locked into lead. At the time, they didn't have a good way to separate it, so the town sat quiet for a few years. But once smelting technology caught up in 1869, Eureka exploded. They called it the Pittsburgh of the West. It's hard to imagine now, as the air tonight is crystal clear and smells of nothing but cold sagebrush. But in the 1870s, this valley was filled with thick, black smoke. There were 16 smelters running day and night, melting the rock to extract the precious metal. The fumes were so bad that they reportedly killed all the vegetation on the surrounding hills. If you were a miner here, you didn't worry about sunburn, you worried about lead poisoning and smelter shakes. As we creep through the centre of town, the headlights wash over the Eureka Opera House. It's a beautiful building, restored to its former glory. Built in 1880, it hosted balls, operas and masquerades. It's a reminder that these people didn't just work, they lived. They wanted culture in the wilderness. They imported silk dresses and grand pianos across the same dusty, rutted trails we just drove over. Next to it is the Eureka County Courthouse, a sturdy brick structure that has been functioning since 1879. It's one of the few 19th century courthouses in Nevada still used for its original purpose. There's something comforting about that continuity. The laws have changed, the vehicles outside have changed, but the building still stands there, dispensing justice in the high desert. Navigating Main Street in a modern rig is tight. The lanes were laid out for wagons, not for trucks with 102-inch wide axles and mirrors that stick out another foot. The buildings are built right up to the sidewalk, creating a canyon effect. The exhaust sound reflects off the brick walls, a deep, hollow rumble. You have to watch your trailer tandems in the mirrors constantly to make sure you aren't scrubbing a curb or taking out a historic lamppost. There's a technical detail about these old mining towns that often goes unnoticed. Beneath the streets we are driving on, there is often a labyrinth of tunnels. Not just mine shafts, but connecting tunnels between buildings. In Eureka, there are rumours and records of tunnels connecting the hotels, the saloons, and the newspaper office. In the winter, when the snowdrifts could be 10 feet high and the wind was howling, you didn't want to walk outside to get a drink or a haircut. You went underground. We passed the Eureka Sentinel Museum. This used to be the office of the Eureka Sentinel newspaper. The building is fascinating because for decades after the paper shut down its printing press in 1960, the equipment was left exactly as it was. Posters from the 1880s were still on the walls. Typecases full of lead letters were sitting ready to be set. It was a time capsule. There is a story about a typesetter who worked there in the 1890s named Ink Sullivan. The legend says he could set type faster backward and upside down, which is how you place the letters in the press, than most people could read forward. He was known for inserting subtle, sarcastic comments into the advertisements of local businesses he didn't like. A butcher shop ad might have a tiny line in the corner that read, "Meat mostly fresh." He never got fired because he was the only one who could keep the ancient steam-powered press running. Driving through here at night, you feel the ghostliness of the place, but not in a scary way. It's a warm presence. The streetlights cast long shadows. A cat runs across the road, pausing to look at the massive chrome grille of the Kenworth before darting into an alley. We are entering the residential section now, moving past houses that date back to the boom years. The windows are dark. The town is asleep. It feels like we are tiptoeing through someone's bedroom. This is the duality of the long-haul trucker. We are intruders in these communities, passing through their silent hours, yet we are also their lifeline. The groceries in their store, the fuel in their gas station, the Amazon packages on their porches, it all came in a truck just like this one, probably rolling through town at 3:00 a.m. just like we are. As we reach the eastern edge of town, the road begins to climb again. We are heading for Pinto Summit. The no-engine brake zone ends, but I leave the switch off for another mile just to be polite. The engine roars to life as I get back on the throttle, the turbo spooling up to pull the load up the grade. Leaving Eureka always feels a bit like leaving a sanctuary. Behind us lies a town with beds, hot food, and history. Ahead lies another 70-odd miles of absolute nothingness before Ely. It's the long-haul section of the night. This stretch of road, from Eureka to Ely, sits at a high elevation. We are cruising mostly above 6,000 feet. The air density is low. This affects the truck's performance in subtle ways. The engine runs a little hotter because the air flowing through the radiator is thinner. It carries away less heat. The turbo has to work harder. Even the tyres behave differently. The pressure increases as we climb, and the atmospheric pressure drops. There's a phenomenon out here called the Nevada false flat. You'll be driving along, and it looks like the road is flat, but your truck is struggling to maintain speed. You mash the throttle, but the speedometer won't budge. You start to think something is wrong with the engine. Maybe a clogged fuel filter, maybe a boost leak. Then you look at your GPS elevation, or a gradient map, and you realise you're actually climbing a steady 2% grade. The landscape is so vast, and the mountains are so far away, that your brain loses its reference for level. The horizon tricks you. It's a humbling optical illusion that has caused many rookie drivers to pull over and check their engines for a problem that doesn't exist. We are climbing Pinto Summit now, elevation 7,376 feet. It's not as steep as Austin, but it's long. The darkness is reclaiming the view. The lights of Eureka are gone, blocked by the terrain. I reach for the thermos. The coffee is still hot. That's the beauty of a good vacuum flask. It defies the laws of thermodynamics just long enough to get you to sunrise. The caffeine hits the bloodstream, sharpening the edges of the vision. There's an old trucker superstition about this stretch of road regarding the white stallion. The legend says that a wild white stallion leads a herd of mustangs across this range, and if you see him standing on the ridge in the moonlight, you're guaranteed a safe trip for the rest of the run. If he turns his back to you, watch out for ice. I've driven this road 100 times and never seen him, but I still find myself scanning the ridgeline. We look for patterns in the chaos. We look for signs that the road is on our side. The descent from Pinto Summit drops us into the Newark Valley. It's another long straight shot. The rhythm of the drive changes here. It becomes less about fighting the wheel and more about endurance. This is where the mental game begins. The friendliest town is behind us, and the copper mines of Ely are still an hour away. You have to find ways to occupy the mind. Some drivers listen to audiobooks, some listen to talk radio, arguing with the host in the privacy of the cab. Some, like us tonight, just narrate the journey, turning the landscape into a story. The temperature outside is dropping again. The dash reads 34 degrees. We are nearing the freezing point. In the desert, the temperature swing is brutal. It can be 80 degrees at noon and freezing at dawn. The metal of the truck expands and contracts with these cycles. Sometimes, when you park after a long run, you can hear the engine ticking as it cools, the metal shrinking back down. It sounds like a clock counting down. We pass a sign for a dirt road leading off into the darkness. Duckwater. It's a Shoshone reservation miles to the south. The names out here are evocative. Duckwater, strawberry, currant. They sound lush, wet and fruity. Everything this landscape is not. It's that aspirational naming convention again, the pioneers trying to manifest moisture through language. The Kenworth is in the groove now. 1400 RPM, 65 mph, 10th gear, top gear in the high range. The tyres are singing a high, steady note. We are a capsule of light moving through a sea of shadow. Eureka, with its brick opera house and silent lead smelters, was a nice intermission, but the show must go on. The road doesn't stop, and neither do we. We have left the comforting brick facade of Eureka behind, and now the road opens up into what many drivers consider the true test of the loneliest road. We are entering the stretch between Eureka and Ely, roughly 77 miles of high desert asphalt that seems to have been laid down by a surveyor who owned a ruler and absolutely nothing else. This is the long haul. In the trucking world, we talk about miles as a unit of distance. But out here, miles are a unit of time and psychology. There are city miles, which are measured in stress, clutch leg cramps and brake applications. Then there are country miles, which are scenic and rolling. And then there are basin miles. These are different. A basin mile is a vacuum. You drive for what feels like an hour, check the odometer, and realise you've only gone 12 miles. The landscape is so vast, so repetitive in its grandeur, that you lose the sense of forward motion. It's like running on a treadmill in front of a painting of a mountain range. The Kenworth is settled into its top gear. 18th, if you're splitting the top box, or just the big hole, as we call it. The engine is turning a lazy 1350 RPM. At this speed, on this flat ground, the truck is barely working. It's just breathing. The turbo boost gauge is resting near zero. This is where fuel economy is made or lost. A steady foot is key. If you get restless and start varying your speed, pushing up to 68, then drifting down to 62, you're burning diesel for no reason. Cruise control is a blessing here, but many old school drivers still prefer the foot throttle. They say it keeps you connected to the machine. If you feel the engine start to lug, you know the wind has picked up before your eyes even register the swaying sagebrush. Let's talk about the scan. This is the technical discipline that keeps you alive when your brain wants to shut down. If you stare at the white line for more than a few seconds, you enter a state called target fixation. Your peripheral vision collapses, and you start to steer toward the thing you're looking at. That's how drivers drift off the road, so you build a rhythm, a visual loop. Road, look far ahead, 15 seconds out. Left mirror, check the trailer tyres, check the passing lane. Gauges, oil, water, air. Road. Right mirror, check the shoulder, look for wildlife. Gauges, road. You do this loop every 8 to 10 seconds. It becomes a dance. It keeps the eyes moving and the brain engaged. Check, check, scan, check, check, scan. On this stretch, the darkness is particularly heavy. We're in the Newark Valley, a massive depression between the Diamond Mountains and the Egan Range. There are no ranch lights here, no cell towers blinking red in the distance. It is a void. Historically, this section of the route drove the early surveyors mad. When the Lincoln Highway Association was mapping this out, there were furious debates about whether to go north through the Ruby Mountains or south through this desolate stretch. They chose this route because it was the most direct line, but direct doesn't mean easy. The early travellers wrote journals describing this specific leg as the endless monotony. They would hang a handkerchief on the steering wheel just to have something different to look at. There's a story about a driver from the 1980s named Calculator Ken. Ken was a math whiz who drove a truck because he liked the solitude. He told me once that to keep his mind sharp on the Eureka to Ely run, he would calculate the volume of the white stripes. He knew a standard highway stripe is 10 feet long and 4 inches wide. He'd estimate the paint thickness, calculate the volume in cubic inches, then multiply it by the number of stripes per mile, which is roughly 132, given the 30-foot gap. He'd try to calculate how many gallons of paint it took to stripe the entire state of Nevada. By the time he finished the math in his head, he was in Ely. It's a strange form of meditation, but out here, whatever keeps you from zoning out is a survival tool. We are passing a landmark, or rather, the absence of one. On the GPS, it marks Antelope Peak to our north, but tonight it's just a patch of sky where the stars aren't shining. The isolation here brings up a phenomenon known as the third man factor. It's usually associated with mountain climbers or polar explorers in extreme duress, where they feel a presence walking beside them, guiding them. Truckers get a version of this. You'll be driving alone, haven't spoken to a soul in 4 hours, and suddenly you get a distinct feeling that someone is sitting in the passenger seat. It's not scary, it's usually comforting. You might even find yourself glancing over or starting a sentence. Did you see that deer? Psychologists say it's the brain projecting companionship to deal with the sensory deprivation. The drone of the engine acts like white noise, putting the mind into a theta state, that twilight zone between waking and sleeping. This is where the creative thinking happens. I've written entire novels in my head on this stretch of US-50. I've solved world hunger, redesigned the trucking industry, and won imaginary arguments with my dispatcher, all while my hands guided the wheel perfectly straight. The trick is remembering any of it when you finally stop. We are starting the long, slow climb toward Robinson Summit. The road surface changes texture here. It's a rougher aggregate, designed to provide grip in the winter snows. The tyres sing a louder, coarser song. Roar. The elevation is creeping up again. We are heading for 7,607 feet. This is the highest pass on the route so far tonight. As the altitude climbs, the temperature drops. The ice warning light on the dash flickers on, a little snowflake icon that tells me the ambient air is 34 degrees or lower. This is the danger zone. The road might look dry, but black ice forms on the bridges and shaded curves first. Black ice isn't actually black, it's clear. It forms a thin, invisible glaze over the asphalt. You don't see it, you feel it. The steering wheel suddenly gets very light, like the connection to the road has been severed. The truck goes quiet because the tyres aren't making friction noise anymore. If that happens, you don't touch the brakes, you don't jerk the wheel, you lift your foot off the throttle, say a prayer, and wait for the tyres to find grip again. The history of this summit is tied to the copper boom. The Robinson mining district, which we are approaching, is one of the richest copper deposits in the world. But before the miners tore the mountains apart, this was a critical crossing for the stagecoaches. The drivers would stop at the summit to rough lock their wheels. They would wrap a heavy chain around the rear wheels of the coach to prevent them from turning, essentially turning the wheels into skids. Then the horses would drag the sled-like coach down the steep grade. It was terrifying but effective. Thankfully, I have a Jake brake and don't need to wrap chains around my drive tyres unless there's 2 feet of snow. Scanning the mirrors, I see the trailer lights glowing steadily. That box behind me is following faithfully. It's strange to develop an affection for a trailer, but you do. It's your dance partner. You have to know where its hips are at all times. We crest Robinson Summit. The world falls away in front of us. Far in the distance, a cluster of lights twinkles like a fallen constellation. That is Ely. But it's deceptive. In the clear desert air, those lights might still be 20 miles away. The descent into the Steptoe Valley is long and sweeping. The Jake brake is on medium, 4 cylinders firing. The sound is a rhythmic purr. We are entering the domain of the Copper Kings. The geology here is different. The rocks are mineral-rich, stained with the green and red of oxidized metal. As we roll down the grade, the radio crackles to life. A voice, clear and strong, cuts through the silence. "Eastbound large car, you got a copy?" I grab the mic. "Go ahead, driver." "Watch yourself at the bottom of the hill. Herd of elk crossing near the junction. They're taking their sweet time." "Copy that. Thanks for the heads up. Have a good one." 10-4. That 10-second exchange is the most social interaction I've had in hours. It's the trucker's telegraph. We look out for each other. That driver didn't have to warn me. He could have just kept rolling. But out here, we are a tribe. The warning about the elk wakes me up more than coffee ever could. Elk are big. Hitting an elk is like hitting a brick wall mounted on stilts. I scan the verge of the road intensely now. My eyes are peeling back the darkness. There, movement. Shadows shifting in the sagebrush. I slow down, bringing the rig down to 45. A massive cow elk steps onto the white line, her breath, pluming in the cold air. She looks at the truck, unimpressed, and saunters across. Behind her, 2 more follow. If I hadn't had that warning, I might have been on top of them at 60 miles an hour. The loneliest road isn't so lonely when you have invisible friends on the radio. We coast past the elk, giving them a wide berth. The lights of Ely are getting brighter, separating into distinct street lamps and house lights. We have survived the long haul. The mental fog is lifting, replaced by the anticipation of the next chapter. We are entering a town built on digging massive holes in the ground and melting what comes out of them. The tyres hum a lower note as we hit the smoother pavement of the valley floor. We check the time. We are right on schedule. The long haul tries to hypnotise you, to lull you into complacency, but tonight, we won. We kept the scan moving. We kept the mind active. And now, we roll into the copper capital of Nevada. The transition from the velvet silence of the Steptoe Valley into the industrial grit of Ely is abrupt. Most towns in Nevada exist to service tourists or travellers. Gas stations, motels, casinos. Ely exists to work. As we roll past the city limits, the air changes. Even inside the sealed cab with the recirculation vent on, you can sense the shift. It's a heavier atmosphere, smelling faintly of sulphur, diesel, and disturbed earth. We are entering the domain of the Copper Kings. While the rest of the state was chasing glittery gold and silver, Ely was digging for the red metal that would electrify the world. Without copper, there is no light bulb, no telephone, no internet. This town built the modern age, 1 ton of ore at a time. As we navigate the junction where US-50 meets US-93, the Great Basin Highway, we have to pay attention to the traffic. At this hour, it's not cars, it's mine traffic. Massive crew buses ferrying workers to the night shift, and service trucks loaded with welding rigs and tyres the size of a small house. The scale of everything here is calibrated to giant. To our right, looming in the darkness like a man-made canyon, is the Robinson Mining District, specifically the Ruth Pit. It's difficult to convey the size of an open-pit copper mine to someone who hasn't stood on the rim. Imagine digging a hole so deep you could stack 2 Empire State Buildings inside it and still not reach the top. The haul trucks that work these pits, the Komatsu 930Es or Caterpillar 797s, are the big brothers to our Kenworth. My entire tractor-trailer fully loaded weighs 80,000 pounds. One of those haul trucks carries 800,000 pounds of rock in a single load. When I pass one of those tyres on a flatbed, just the rubber donut is taller than my cab. It's humbling. In the hierarchy of diesel machines, I'm driving a toy. But the real heart of Ely's history isn't just the digging, it's the hauling. And before trucks like mine took over the highways, the lifeline of this town was the Nevada Northern Railway. As we rumble through the intersection of Avenue A and East 11th Street, we pass the depot and the rail yards of what is widely considered the best-preserved short-line railroad in North America. This isn't a museum where things are behind glass. This is a working time machine. The Nevada Northern Railway, known as the Ghost Train of Old Ely, still runs on the original 1906 tracks, using the original steam locomotives, stored in the original engine house. There is a visceral, almost biological difference between a modern diesel truck and a steam locomotive. My Kenworth is a computer-controlled precision instrument. I turn a key, and the ECU wakes up, checking sensors. A steam locomotive, like the massive engine 93 that lives here, is a beast that you have to wake up gently. You don't just start it, you build a fire in its belly. It takes hours to build enough pressure to move. It breathes, it sweats oil and water, it groans as the metal expands. I had the privilege once of talking to an old master mechanic at the yards here, a guy named Sooty Sam. His hands were permanently stained with coal dust and grease. He told me that driving a steam train is like wrestling a dragon. You don't steer it, he said. You manage its anger. He described the sanding the flues technique. To clean the soot out of the boiler tubes while moving, the fireman would shovel a scoop of sand into the firebox while the engine was working hard. The massive draft would suck the sand through the tubes, scouring them clean and shooting a plume of black, gritty smoke hundreds of feet into the air. He said the sound was like 1,000 shotguns going off at once. Comparing the logistics of the railroad to trucking is fascinating. A single ore train coming down from the Ruth mine to the smelter at McGill, just north of here, could carry thousands of tons of rock. To move that same amount with my truck, I'd have to make 50 trips. The efficiency of steel wheels on steel rails is unmatched. That's why, even today, you see unit trains moving coal and grain. We truckers handle the last mile and the time-sensitive stuff, but the railroad is still the king of heavy lifting. As we drive parallel to the tracks for a moment, I glance over. The yard is dark now, but the shapes of the rolling stock are visible. Cranes, boxcars, and the looming silhouette of the coaling tower. It's a cathedral of the Industrial Revolution. One of the unique features of the Nevada Northern is its wig-wag signals. Before the modern flashing red lights and drop-down gates, railroad crossings were guarded by these mechanical pendulums. A magnetic motor would swing a red disc back and forth, tick-tock, tick-tock, while a mechanical gong rang out. It was a hypnotic physical warning. There are very few left in the wild, but Ely has preserved them. Seeing one swing into action is like watching a silent film come to life. The town of Ely itself has a gritty resilience. It has boomed and busted with the price of copper. In the 1970s, when copper prices crashed, the town nearly died. Kennecott, the mining company, shut everything down. People walked away from their homes. The railroad stopped running. But they didn't tear it up. They just locked the doors. That's why it's so well preserved today. It was frozen in time, waiting for the price of metal to rise again, or for tourists to discover it. We are cruising down Altman Street now, the main drag. The Hotel Nevada rises on the left, its famous neon sign blazing. When it opened in 1929, it was the tallest building in Nevada. It was a beacon for travelers, bootleggers, and movie stars. They say the Prohibition-era whiskey served there was made in stills hidden in the mine shafts. Driving a truck through a town like this at night requires urban scanning. You're watching for drunk pedestrians stumbling out of the casinos, yes, but also for the infrastructure. The traffic lights here are hung on wires that might be a little lower than standard. The corners are tight. I swing the tractor wide into the left lane to make a right turn onto the highway leading out of town. The trailer pivots on its tandems, the tyres scrubbing the pavement. Scrut. I watch the rear wheels in the convex mirror. They miss the curb by 6 inches. Perfect. The smell of coal smoke sometimes lingers in this valley, especially in the winter when the steam train is running its special winter steam excursions. It's a nostalgic scent, acrid, sulphurous, but comforting. It smells like 1910. It smells like progress. There's a legendary story about the ghost train moniker. It's not just marketing. The railroad crews swear that late at night, in the echoing cavern of the engine house, they can hear the sounds of tools clanking and men talking, even when the building is empty. They say it's the night shift from 1930 still fixing the rod bearings on engine 40, unaware that they've been dead for decades. One driver I know, a flatbedder named Iron Mike, broke down near the tracks a few years ago. He was waiting for a service truck and decided to walk along the rails to stretch his legs. He claims he saw a lantern swinging in the distance moving toward him. He waited, thinking it was a security guard. The lantern kept coming, bobbing in the dark, but there was no one holding it, just a light floating about 4 feet off the ground. Mike ran back to his truck, locked the doors, and didn't come out until the sun came up. He says he'll never park near the rails in Ely again. As we leave the lights of Ely behind, the road begins to climb toward Connors Pass. We are leaving the industrial island and heading back into the wild. The copper pits, the steam trains, and the neon of the Hotel Nevada fade into the rear view. The transition is stark. 1 minute you're surrounded by the heavy machinery of the 20th century. and the next you're back in the timeless dark of the Great Basin. But the energy of Ely sticks with you. It's a reminder that this empty land is actually full of treasure if you're willing to dig deep enough and endure the isolation. The engine roars as we tackle the grade. We are hauling mining equipment after all, spare parts for a crusher or a conveyor system. We are part of the ecosystem. We are bringing the tools that keep the heart of Ely beating. The steam trains might be the ghosts, but we are the blood flow. We check the time. We are making excellent progress. The border with Utah is getting closer, but we have one more major detour to discuss. A place where the earth reaches up to touch the sky in a way that defies the desert definition. We are heading toward the realm of the oldest living things on the planet. The radio is silent again. The trucker's telegraph has gone quiet now that we are away from the mine traffic. It's just us and the high beams cutting a tunnel through the night. The copper is behind us, but the ancient wood is ahead. Leaving the copper-stained ridges of Ely behind, we cross Connors Pass and drop into what might be the most expansive void we have encountered all night, Spring Valley. The name sounds pastoral, perhaps evoking images of bubbling brooks and green meadows. Do not be deceived. This is a high desert basin of epic proportions, a massive trough running north-south that feels less like a valley and more like a separation between worlds. To our right, rising like a jagged wall of obsidian against the stars, is the Snake Range. This is the home of Great Basin National Park. It is one of the least visited national parks in the lower 48 states, not because it lacks grandeur, it is spectacular, but because it is incredibly hard to get to. You don't stumble upon this place on your way to Disney World. You have to mean it. You have to commit to the drive. As we hold the steering wheel steady against the crosswinds that love to howl through this valley, we are passing the gateway to something ancient. Up there, clinging to the rocky scree slopes just below the tree line, live the Great Basin bristlecone pines, Pinus longeva. These aren't just old trees. They are the oldest known non-clonal living organisms on Earth. Some of them were seedlings when the Egyptians were building the pyramids at Giza. They were already ancient when Jesus walked in Galilee. They were gnarled veterans by the time the Roman Empire fell. We are talking about living wood that is nearly 5,000 years old. There is a profound humility in driving a state-of-the-art machine past these groves. My truck engine is designed to last maybe 1,000,000 miles, roughly 10 to 15 years of hard service. Those trees measure their lifespan in millennia. They survive not by growing fast, but by living slow. They grow in the harshest conditions imaginable: high altitude, alkaline soil, freezing winds and drought. The adversity makes the wood so dense and resinous that it is almost like stone. Insects can't bore into it. Rot can't take hold. They don't just survive the elements, they are sculpted by them. There is a tragic story connected to these trees, one that serves as a cautionary tale for science. In 1964, a geography grad student was doing research on ice ages and needed to sample the rings of the trees to study climate history. He found a particularly old-looking tree on Wheeler Peak. His coring tool, a manual drill, broke off inside the trunk. He asked a park ranger for help. They decided to cut the tree down to retrieve the tool and get a full cross-section of the trunk. They cut it down. When they counted the rings, the blood must have drained from their faces. The tree, which they had named Prometheus, was 4,162 years old. They had just killed the oldest known living thing on the planet to get a drill bit back. It caused a massive uproar and eventually led to the strict protections we have today. It's a stark reminder that sometimes we destroy the things we're trying to understand. From the cab of the truck, we can't see the trees, they are thousands of feet above us, but we can feel the presence of the mountain. Wheeler Peak looms at 13,063 feet. It creates its own weather. You can be driving in clear starlight down here in the valley while a blizzard is raging up at the summit. The darkness here is another feature that deserves respect. We're in the heart of an international dark sky park. This region has some of the darkest skies in the United States. There is zero light pollution. No city glow, no suburban streetlights, just absolute crushing blackness. For a trucker, this level of darkness presents a unique optical challenge. The contrast between your dashboard lights and the outside world can be blinding. If your dash is too bright, your pupils constrict and you become night blind to the road. You can't see the deer, the curves, or the debris until it's too late. This is where the dimmer switch discipline comes in. Experienced night runners turn their dash lights down to the absolute minimum, just a faint glow to see the needles, Some of us even swap out our interior bulbs for red LEDs. Red light doesn't destroy your night vision, rhodopsin, the way white or blue light does. It's the same trick submarine crews and astronomers use. Inside the cab, it looks like a photography darkroom. It allows you to look out the windshield and actually see the texture of the night. Tonight, with the dash dimmed low, the sky is overwhelming. The Milky Way isn't just a smudge, it's a structured cloud of light, with dark lanes of dust clearly visible. The stars are so numerous that the familiar constellations get lost in the background noise of the galaxy. I remember a story from a driver named Stargazer Steve. He was running a flatbed of lumber through Spring Valley a few years back. He pulled over onto the wide shoulder to check his load straps, or so he said. Really, he just wanted to look up. He turned off his headlights, stepped out of the cab and looked straight up at the zenith. He said the sheer number of stars gave him a sudden violent attack of vertigo. He felt like he was falling up into the sky. He had to grab the rub rail of his trailer to anchor himself to the earth. The silence was so deep and the sky so big that he felt like he was floating in space. He got back in the truck, turned on the dome light just to feel grounded, and drank a Red Bull before he could drive again. It's too much, he told me. It makes you realise that 80,000 pounds of steel is nothing. We are fighting the wind now. Spring Valley acts as a wind tunnel. The air, cooling rapidly on the high peaks, rushes down into the valley floor, accelerating as it goes. These represent katabatic winds. For a high-profile vehicle like a tractor-trailer, a strong crosswind is an invisible hand trying to push you into the ditch. You feel it in the steering. The truck wants to drift. Right. You have to counter-steer, holding the wheel slightly to the left just to go straight. It's physically exhausting. You're constantly making micro-adjustments. If a gust hits you unexpectedly, say coming out from the shelter of a ridge, it can push the trailer 3 feet into the other lane before you can react. That's why you'll often see us hugging the white line on the windward side, giving ourselves a buffer zone. We pass the small cluster of lights that marks the turnoff for Baker, Nevada. Baker is the gateway town to the park. It's tiny, population around 65. It's an artist's enclave, a ranching community, and a haven for people who really want to be left alone. There's a fence near there that's famous for being decorated with sculptures made of scrap metal and old car parts. It fits. In the desert, you don't throw things away, you turn them into art. The road surface here in the valley is straight, but it has a rhythm of heaves. The freeze-thaw cycle of the ground creates undulations in the pavement. At 65 miles an hour, the truck floats over them. Whoomp whoomp. The air ride suspension of the seat absorbs the vertical motion, but you can see the headlights bouncing on the road ahead. We are hauling heavy tonight, which actually helps in the wind. A light trailer, an empty box, is a kite. A loaded trailer is an anchor. The 45,000 pounds of mining equipment holds us down, but you still have to respect the physics. As we roll past the turnoff, I glance at the temperature gauge again. It has dropped to 28 degrees. The high desert freezes hard. The heater fan hums a comforting note. It's strange to think that just a few miles up that slope, there are trees standing in the freezing wind that have stood there for 5,000 winters. They don't have heaters. They just endure. There is a lesson in those trees for us long haulers. Endurance isn't about speed. It's about consistency. It's about weathering the storms and staying rooted. We chase the miles trying to get there faster, but the bristlecones know that the real trick is just to keep standing. The road begins to curve gently to the east, aiming for the next barrier, the Confusion Range, which is actually in Utah, but we are getting close. But before we leave Nevada, we have to deal with the geographical reality of Wheeler Peak one more time. We are essentially driving around the base of a sky island. The ecosystem up there is alpine tundra. Down here it's sagebrush steppe. We are driving through a desert looking up at a glacier. Yes, a glacier. Wheeler Peak hosts the only active glacier in Nevada, though some argue it's technically a rock glacier, or an ice field now due to shrinking. But the fact remains, there is permanent ice in the middle of the driest state in the nation. It's hiding in the cirque, shaded by the massive cliffs. We check the mirrors. No headlights behind us. We are the only ship on this ocean. The red glow of the interior lights makes the cab feel like a cockpit. The CB is silent. The world is asleep except for us, the wind, and the ancient pines watching from the ridge. We power on, the engine notes steady and strong. We are leaving the shadow of the Snake Range, but the feeling of the place lingers. It's a feeling of smallness. In the city, you feel big in a truck. You tower over the cars. Out here, under the Milky Way and the shadow of Prometheus, you're just a speck of dust moving slightly faster than the other dust. The road begins to tilt upward again, leaving the expansive floor of Spring Valley behind. We are initiating the climb towards Sacramento Pass. While not the highest summit on our journey tonight, Connors and Robinson were higher. This pass feels significant because of what stands sentinel directly to our right. We're driving in the literal shadow of a giant. Wheeler Peak isn't just a mountain, it's a geological assertion. Rising to 13,063 feet, it is the second highest point in Nevada. But because it rises so abruptly from the valley floor, its vertical prominence is staggering. At night, you don't see the details of the limestone cliffs or the quartzite ridges. You see a massive void in the starfield. It looks as if someone took a pair of scissors and cut a jagged triangle out of the Milky Way. As the Kenworth digs into the grade, the turbocharger spooling up to a high-pitched whistle, we are entering a zone of extreme contrast. We are driving through a high desert environment, surrounded by sagebrush and pinyon pine, yet just a few thousand vertical feet above us, there is an ecosystem that belongs in the Arctic Circle. This is the concept of the Sky Island. Biologists love this term, and it makes sense to a trucker too. Imagine the Great Basin not as land, but as a sea of sagebrush. The mountain ranges are islands rising out of that sea. The animals and plants stranded on the peaks, the marmots, the piñas, the alpine wildflowers, are castaways. They can't cross the hot, dry valleys to get to the next range. They are isolated on their peaks, evolving in solitude for 10,000 years. It's a lot like the trucking life if you think about it. We are isolated in our cabs, floating through the sea of the general public. We have our own language, our own customs, our own radio channels. We wave when we pass each other because we recognize a fellow islander in the stream of traffic. The climb up Sacramento Pass is deceptive. It starts gradual, then bites. I drop a gear, then another. The splitter clicks, snap, and I slide the shifter into 13th. The engine RPM jumps to a 600, then settles as the load drags us back. We are hauling heavy, remember? That mining equipment isn't getting any lighter. The coolant temperature needle creeps right. The fan clutch engages. Woo! Roaring like a prop plane taking off. It's a parasitic draw on the horsepower, but it's necessary. You have to pay the heat tax to climb the hill. Up there, hidden in the cirque beneath the summit face, lies the feature that defies the desert logic, the Wheeler Peak Glacier. Now, calling it a glacier often starts a fight among geologists. Some prefer rock glacier or ice field. But whatever you call it, it is a massive body of ice that has no business existing in the driest state in the Union. How does it survive? It uses a trick that every flatbed hauler understands: tarping. When we haul a load that can't get wet or sun damaged, we cover it with a heavy vinyl tarp. The glacier does the same thing, but it uses rocks. Over centuries, the quartzite cliffs above shatter from the freeze-thaw cycle. These boulders fall onto the ice, covering it in a thick layer of scree. This rock blanket insulates the ice from the blistering Nevada sun. The ice is there, churning and moving slowly, but it's buried. It's a stealth glacier. It's a perfect metaphor for this road. US-50 hides its treasures. You have to look under the surface, under the sagebrush, behind the ridges, under the history books, to find the real stories. If you just drive it at 75 miles per hour with the radio blasting, you see rocks. If you slow down and look, you see the ice. The weather on Sacramento Pass is notorious for its schizophrenia. You can be wearing a t-shirt in Ely and hit a whiteout blizzard here 20 minutes later. The mountain creates its own weather. The moisture-laden air hits the peak, rises, cools, and dumps everything it has right on this stretch of asphalt. There's a legendary cautionary tale about a driver named Snowblind Sammy. Back in the days before accurate weather apps, Sammy was running a load of produce, lettuce I think, westbound toward Reno in late October. The sky was clear when he left the Utah border. By the time he hit Sacramento Pass, the wind had shifted. A localized squall hit the peak. Sammy didn't chain up. It's just a dusting, he thought. I can power through. This is the most dangerous sentence in the English language for a truck driver. He lost traction halfway up the grade. The drive wheel started spinning, polishing the ice until it was slicker than greased glass. He slid backward. Not fast, just a slow, agonizing slide toward the guardrail. The trailer jackknifed, folding slowly against the tractor until the fairings crunched. He spent 2 days up there stuck in a drift. He had fuel, so he had heat, but he ran out of food. The story goes that when the plough crews finally reached him, he was trying to figure out how to cook a head of iceberg lettuce on the exhaust manifold. He survived, but he learned the lesson. The mountain doesn't care about your delivery schedule. When the chain law lights are flashing, or even when the sky just looks a distinctive shade of angry grey, you pull over and throw the iron. Hanging iron, putting tyre chains on is a rite of passage. It's miserable work. You're kneeling in slush, your fingers are frozen, the wind is whipping ice crystals into your eyes, and you're trying to wrestle a 60-pound web of steel chain over a tyre that stands 4 feet tall. You have to tighten the cam locks with a wrench, checking the tension so the chains don't slap the fenders and rip your mud flaps off. But when you hear that rhythmic clank 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 of the chains biting into the pack, you feel invincible. You become a tank. Tonight, thankfully, the road is dry. The thermometer reads 26 degrees, but the humidity is low. No ice. Just the relentless pull of gravity. As we crest Sacramento Pass at 754 feet, the strain on the engine vanishes. The silence returns as I let off the throttle. We are now officially entering the eastern approach to the Great Basin. To the east, the Snake Valley opens up, a vast dark bowl that straddles the Nevada-Utah border. The descent is steep. I set the Jake brake to max. The engine growls, holding the weight back. In the distance, far across the valley, you can see the faint lights of Garrison, Utah. We are getting close to the line. The geology here is violent. We are driving through the Snake Range décollement. It sounds like a French dessert, but it's actually a massive fault zone where layers of rock have slid over each other, stretching the crust until it's snapped. This entire landscape is the result of the Earth being pulled apart. I reach for the CB handset just to check the channel. Breaker 19, anyone wandering around Sacramento Pass tonight? Silence. Just the static of the cosmos. Sometimes, on these high passes, you pick up weird signals. Skip from hundreds of miles away. I've heard taxi dispatches from Mexico, fishermen from the Louisiana Bayou, and once, very clearly, a drive-through order from a Burger King in what sounded like Texas. The radio waves bounce off the ionosphere and land right here in the silence. It's ghost voices from the rest of the world, reminding you that civilization is still out there, somewhere. The road sweeps into a long banked curve. The headlights catch the eyes of a mule deer standing on the embankment. It freezes, ears swiveling. I tap the air horn, a short, sharp blast. It bolts. "Stay safe, little buddy," I mutter. "You talk to the animals a lot out here. It's not crazy, it's polite. They were here first. We are just the noisy tenants passing through their living room." Near the bottom of the pass, there's a turnoff for a place called Osceola. It was a gold mining camp famous for producing large nuggets. One nugget found there weighed 24 pounds. Imagine picking up a rock the size of a bowling ball and realizing it's solid gold. That kind of wealth drives men insane. There are stories of miners in Osceola who would pay for whiskey with gold dust, spilling half of it on the floor because they didn't care. They say the floorboards of the old saloons were burned down just to sift the ashes for the gold that fell through the cracks. We aren't hauling gold, we're hauling steel. But in a way, the truck is the modern gold pan. We sift the miles to find the paycheck. It's a grind, but it's honest. As we level out into the Snake Valley, the wind hits us again. This time it's coming from the south, a crosswind that wants to push the trailer into the sagebrush. I tighten my grip on the wheel. The suspension sways slightly. Rock and roll. You have to relax your body while keeping your hands firm. If you tense up, you'll be exhausted in 10 minutes. You have to flow with the truck. We are approaching the state line. But before we get there, there is a strange sense of finality to this section. The mountains are behind us now. The Toyabs, the Simpson Park Range, the Egan's, the Shells, the Snakes. We have crossed the corrugated spine of Nevada. We have climbed and descended, like a ship riding rogue waves of stone. Wheeler Peak is now behind us, over the right shoulder. If I check the mirror, I can see its silhouette blocking the stars one last time. It's the king of the lonely road, the silent observer. It saw the Pony Express riders freezing in their saddles. It saw the Model Ts boiling over. It saw snowblind Sammy cooking lettuce on his manifold. And it sees us, a set of red taillights fading into the east. The engine settles into a cruise. 65 mph. The final stretch of Nevada lies ahead. It's been a long night, but the border represents a psychological finish line. Not the end of the work. We still have to get to Salt Lake, but the end of the loneliest road. We check the gauges. All green. The truck is running perfectly, having conquered the climbs without a hiccup. Modern engineering is a miracle we take for granted. We trust our lives to bolts, hoses, and microchips in a landscape that wants to kill us. And most of the time, it works. We are now running the final miles of Nevada asphalt. The Snake Valley spreads out around us, a vast, flat expanse of greasewood and alkali dust that serves as the doormat to the Utah border. The road here is ruler straight, a final act of defiance by the engineers against the chaos of the mountains we just traversed. This section of the drive is psychologically tricky. You can see the lights of Border Inn, the combination gas station, motel and slot machine parlour that sits straddling the state line, from 20 miles away. In the clear desert air it looks tantalisingly close, a beacon of coffee and civilization. But as we know, distance here is a liar. You drive for 10 minutes and the lights don't seem to get any brighter. It's the desert treadmill effect in full force. As we cruise toward the boundary, we have to deal with one of the most confusing aspects of cross-country trucking: time travel. Not the sci-fi kind, but the logistical kind. We are about to cross from the Pacific time zone into the Mountain time zone. For a civilian in a car, losing an hour is an annoyance. Oh, it's 3 a.m? Now it's 4 a.m? Guess I'll sleep in. For a trucker operating under the strict tyranny of the electronic logging device, ELD, crossing a time zone is a math problem that can ruin your day. The Federal Hours of Service regulations don't care about the clock on the wall, they care about the elapsed time. But your delivery appointment in Salt Lake City is set in Mountain time. Your pickup back in Reno was in Pacific time. Your body's running on I need sleep time. I glance at the dash clock. It reads 03:45. In 10 miles, it will magically become 50:45. That delivery appointment for Skawa. Suddenly it's a lot tighter. The lost hour evaporates into the ether of the desert, stolen by the longitude lines. The geography here marks the transition out of the Basin and Range province. We are leaving the rhythmic up-down topography of Nevada and entering the Great Salt Lake Desert region of western Utah. The mountains don't disappear, but they change character. They become more isolated, more eroded. The valleys become wider, whiter, and saltier. We pass a sign for the Great Basin National Heritage Area. It's a reminder that this isn't just empty space. It's a cultural landscape. The Shoshone, the Paiute, the Goshute, they all found ways to thrive here. They knew where the springs were. They knew which pine nuts were sweet and which were bitter. We just blast through in our climate-controlled capsules, oblivious to the subtle map written on the land. There is a distinct change in the road surface as we approach the border. You can often tell you've crossed a state line with your eyes closed just by the sound of the tyres. Nevada uses a specific aggregate mix, often volcanic, that has a coarse, rumbling texture. Utah's pavement tends to be smoother, sometimes concrete in the heavier traffic areas, singing a higher-pitched note, and then there it is, the sign. Welcome to Utah, life elevated. And right next to it, the Border Inn. The Border Inn is a geographical curiosity. The actual state line runs right through the property. The motel rooms are in Utah. The casino and bar are in Nevada. This is because gambling is legal in Nevada and illegal in Utah. So, you can drink a beer and play a slot machine on the left side of the building, then walk 10 feet to the right into Utah to go to sleep. It's a masterclass in exploiting jurisdiction. We slow down as we pass the complex. There are a few trucks parked in the dirt lot, engines idling, the white smoke puffing rhythmically into the cold air. These are the drivers who ran out of hours just before the line. They are sleeping in Nevada to wake up in Utah. It's a strategic pause. As we cross the invisible line, I check the mirrors. Goodbye, Nevada. Goodbye to the loneliest road. We have survived the 287 miles from Fernley, where US-50 splits from I-80, to here. We have crossed 12 mountain summits. We have driven through the ghosts of the Pony Express, the dreams of silver miners, and the shadows of ancient pines. But the road doesn't end just because the state changes. US-50 continues. It goes all the way to Ocean City, Maryland. It is a transcontinental artery. but the character shifts immediately. In Utah, the road widens. The shoulders are paved and generous. The signage is newer. The feeling of being out there fades slightly as we enter the sphere of influence of the Wasatch Front. The immediate landscape in Utah is the confusion of the Confusion Range. Yes, that is the actual name. It was named by early surveyors who got hopelessly turned around in the rugged, illogical topography. The ridges here don't run in neat north-south lines like in Nevada. They swirl and knot together. For us, it means one last series of technical curves before the final flat run to Delta. The Kings Canyon, not the one in California, lies ahead. It's a narrow, winding limestone gorge that feels like a cathedral nave. The rock walls rise vertically from the pavement edge. There is no shoulder here. If you drift 6 inches, you are scraping rock. Navigating Kings Canyon at night is intense. The headlights reflect off the pale limestone walls, creating a tunnel of light. The engine sound reverberates, bouncing back at us instantly. Roar, roar, roar. It amplifies the sense of speed. You have to trust the machine. You have to trust that the engineers banked the curves correctly. There is a trucker legend about the phantom hitchhiker of Kings Canyon. Drivers claim to see a woman in a white dress standing on the narrow verge of the road, right in the tightest curve. When they look back in the mirror, she's gone. Some say she's a bride who died in a crash. Others say she's just a trick of the limestone reflecting the moon. I've never seen her, but I always lift my foot off the throttle in that curve, just in case. Beyond the canyon, the Sevier Desert awaits. This is the bed of the ancient Lake Bonneville. It is flat, white, and dusty. In the daylight, it is blinding. At night, it is a grey ocean. We are now running on Sevier body time. The adrenaline of the mountain passes is gone. The challenge of the curves is over. This is the danger zone for fatigue. The road is straight. The engine is droning. The heater is warm. The body wants to shut down. This is when we use our tricks. I crack the driver's side window an inch. The rush of cold air, now 24 degrees, hits my face like a slap. It wakes up the nerves. I reach for the bag of sunflower seeds. The act of cracking the shell, separating the seed and spitting the hull keeps the mouth and brain occupied. It's a fidget spinner for truckers. The floor of the cab might be covered in shells by the time we hit Delta, but we will be awake. I check the fuel gauge. The tanks are still half full. We have plenty of range. The beauty of these big rigs is their endurance. With dual 150-gallon tanks, we can run for nearly 2,000 miles without stopping if we had to, and if the law allowed. We are self-sufficient. We pass a sign for Skull Rock Pass. The names out here never get cheerful, do they? It's always skull, death, confusion, or desolation. It speaks to the mindset of the people who named them. They weren't having a vacation. They were struggling to survive. To us sitting on air ride seats with satellite radio, it's just scenery. To them, it was an adversary. The lights of a distant vehicle appear in the oncoming lane. The first one we've seen in an hour. It's another truck. As we close the gap, closing speed roughly 130 miles per hour, I prepare the salute. I dim my headlights so I don't blind him. He does the same. As we pass, I raise my left hand from the steering wheel, palm open. He flashes his marker lights. Blink, blink. Acknowledged. Safe travels, driver. That brief moment of contact is significant. We are 2 ships passing in the desert night, heading in opposite directions but sharing the same reality. He's heading into the gauntlet I just finished. He has the summits, the petroglyphs, and the shoe tree ahead of him. I have the salt flats and the city. We are now firmly in Utah. The Loneliest Road moniker technically applies to the Nevada section, but the spirit of it bleeds over the border. The silence is the same. The stars are the same. But we can feel the pull of the destination now. The barn is calling. Salt Lake City is the hub. That's where the warehouses are. That's where the logistics chain connects. We are bringing the raw materials of the earth to the center of industry. The road stretches out, a black ribbon on a grey canvas. We are the needle sewing the states together. Nevada is behind us, a memory of steep grades and singing dunes. Utah is ahead, a promise of sunrise and a hot breakfast. We check the mirror one last time. The darkness of the Great Basin is immense, swallowing everything we just passed. But we made it through. The load is safe, the driver is awake, and the wheels keep turning. The Sevier Desert stretches out in every direction, a landscape of muted greys and whites. that seems to absorb the beam of the headlights rather than reflect it. We have left the dramatic architecture of the mountains behind, the jagged skyline of the Snake Range, the fortress of the Toyabes, and entered a place of profound horizontal stillness. The road here, cutting through the ancient bed of Lake Bonneville, is so flat and so straight that the steering wheel feels locked in place, the tyres tracing a line that was drawn by geometry itself. We are in the final phase of the night. This is the hour of the wolf, often defined as that murky span between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., when the biological rhythms of the world are at their lowest ebb. Even the wind seems to have tired itself out. The cab of the Kenworth is a silent sanctuary. The only sound a low, harmonious drone of wind rushing over the mirrors and the steady, rhythmic combustion of the engine. It is in this quiet vacuum that the mind circles back to the name of the road we have spent the night traversing, the loneliest road in America. When Life magazine slapped that label on US-50 back in the 80s, they meant it as a pejorative. They saw the lack of McDonald's, the lack of billboards, and the lack of amusement parks as a deficit. They saw nothing. But tonight, after crossing 300 miles of this terrain, we know better. We know that lonely and solitude are two very different things. Loneliness is a feeling of isolation, a desperate craving for connection that isn't there. Solitude is a choice. It is the state of being alone without being lonely. It is a constructive emptiness. Out here, the road isn't empty. It is open. And in a world that is increasingly crowded, noisy, and demanding of our attention, that openness is the ultimate luxury. Why do we do this? Why do we choose a profession that keeps us away from home for weeks at a time, sleeping in a box behind the driver's seat, showering in truck stops and talking to the radio? It's not just for the paycheck. There are easier ways to make a living than fighting ice on Sacramento Pass or dodging elk in the Steptoe Valley. We do it for moments like this. We do it for the clarity. There is a technical term in trucking called governed speed. Most fleet trucks are electronically limited to 62 or 65 miles per hour to save fuel and insurance costs. You can mash the pedal to the floor, but the computer says no more. In our daily lives, we are all governed. We are governed by schedules, by social obligations, by the constant ping of notifications on our phones. We are throttled back by the noise of modern existence. But out here, on US-50, the governor is removed. Not on the engine, I'm still keeping her at a legal cruise, but on the mind. The desert strips away the noise. When you look out at a landscape that hasn't changed since the Pleistocene epoch, your deadline for that email suddenly feels very insignificant. The geology puts your ego in check. We think back to the people we met tonight. The Pony Express riders galloping through the alkali dust. They weren't just delivering mail, they were testing the limits of human endurance against a hostile planet. The miners in Eureka and Austin digging deep into the crust for silver and copper. They were gambling their lives for a chance at a future. The architects of Stokes Castle, building a folly on a hill just because they could. Even the people throwing shoes into the cottonwood tree at Middlegate. They were all seeking something in this vastness. They were all leaving a mark. We are part of that lineage. This truck, with its satellite navigation and emissions control systems, is just the latest version of the covered wagon. We're still moving cargo from east to west, following the path of the sun. The technology changes, but the mission remains the same: keep moving. As we check the instrument cluster one last time, every needle is exactly where it should be. The oil pressure is strong, the water temperature is stable, the air tanks are full. The machine is happy. There is a deep satisfaction in operating a piece of heavy machinery that is running perfectly. It's a partnership. I take care of the truck, checking the fluids, greasing the chassis, watching the tyres, and the truck takes care of me. It protects me from the cold, carries my burden, and gets me home. The lights of Delta, Utah are beginning to smudge the horizon ahead, a faint orange haze that signals the return of the grid. Soon there will be traffic lights. There will be other cars. There will be the complex dance of merging and yielding. The solitude will fracture. But for these last few miles, we hold on to the feeling of the Great Basin. We remember the singing sands of Sand Mountain, humming their low mystery. We remember the silent petroglyphs at Hickerson, watching us pass with stone eyes. We remember the cold wind on the peaks and the warm comfort of the cab. The road is a teacher. It teaches you patience. You can't force the miles, you can't make the mountain pass any lower, or the straightaway any shorter. You have to sit with it, you have to endure it. In a culture that demands instant gratification, the road says, wait, watch, drive. There is a phenomenon known to long haulers called the high of the drive. It usually hits right about now, near the end of a long shift. Your body is tired, yes, but your mind is incredibly clear. The rhythm of the road has synchronized with your heartbeat. You feel a sense of profound peace. All the problems you loaded into the cab with you back in Carson City, the worries about money, relationships, the future, they have been shaken out by the vibration of the road. They are left behind in the sagebrush somewhere near the shoe tree. We are lighter now. The load in the trailer is the same weight, but the load on the driver is gone. The sky to the east is changing. It's not light yet, but the darkness is softening. It's turning from a hard obsidian black to a deep bruised purple. The stars are retreating one by one, bowing out before the sun claims the stage. The hour of the wolf is ending. We have crossed the loneliest road. We didn't just survive it, we lived it. We let it wash over us, and we found that the journalist who named it was wrong. It's not lonely. It's crowded with history, alive with geology, and filled with the quiet companionship of the earth itself. As we prepare to slow down for the first time in hours, disengaging the cruise control and letting the truck coast, we offer a silent thanks to the asphalt ribbon. It held us up. It guided us through the dark. The journey's never really over. We will unload in Salt Lake, grab some sleep, load up again and head somewhere else. Maybe north to Idaho, maybe east to Wyoming. The road goes on forever, but this specific night, this traverse of the high desert is finished. We have earned our rest. The engine RPM drops as we drift toward the shoulder of the road, the tyres crunching softly onto the gravel of a wide turnout just outside of town. We pull the yellow parking brake valve, psht, and the sudden hiss of escaping air signals the end of our watch. The massive diesel engine idles for a moment, cooling down, its rhythm slowing to a gentle rocking lope, before I reach up and twist the key. Silence rushes back in to fill the cab. It's a thick, heavy silence, ringing slightly in the ears after hours of turbo whine and wind noise. The dashboard lights dim and fade to black. The world outside is still, suspended in that breathless moment before dawn. You can relax now, the drive is done. The mountain passes are behind us, their steep grades and icy corners just memories in the rearview mirror. The white line has stopped moving. The vibration in the floorboards has ceased. We are stationary, anchored safely to the earth. Close your eyes and let the residual motion of the road leave your body. Feel the warmth of the bunk, the softness of the pillow. The desert outside is keeping watch, its vast, open arms holding the silence so you can sleep. There is no more scanning, no more shifting, no more calculating miles. There is only the quiet. The ghosts of the Pony Express riders have bedded down. The miners have laid down their picks. The singing sands are whispering a lullaby. You are safe in the capsule, warm and secure. Let the darkness wrap around you like a heavy quilt. Breathe in deep, slow and steady. The road will be there when you wake up, but for now it's time to drift away. Sweet dreams.